The Thom Hartmann program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com.
The Thom Hartmann program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit freespeechbeets.com. And welcome to the Thom Hartmann Book Club, Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from Tears We Cannot Stop, A Sermon to White America by Michael Eric Dyson, who was a guest on our program a while back. This is from page 86. One of the great privileges of whiteness is not to see color, not to see race, and not to pay a price for ignoring it, except, of course, when you're called on it. But even then, the price pales quite literally in comparison to the high price black folk pay for being black. We pay a price too for not even being able to derive recognition and financial reward for the styles that make the world want to be black so bad that they don't mind looking like us as long as they never ever have to be us. If the appropriators can freely rip off our culture with no consequences, those who revise racial history, the fourth stage of white racial grief, are even less accountable for their deeds. The way of the racial revisionist when it comes to black life and history is simply to rewrite it. Their motto is, it didn't happen that way. There's a flood of writing that tells us that the Civil War wasn't really about slavery, but about an effort to defend states' rights. But, my friend, you've got to put yourself in our place and see the absurdity of such a claim. Defend the rights of states to do what? To enslave blacks. But even here, the irresistible logic of whiteness, that is, irresistible to whites themselves, and to all of us who are subjected to white whim, springs into full action. White American history is so powerful that even when it loses, it wins, at least in skirmishes within whiteness itself. From the right wing, there is the belief that the Civil War was fought over the ability of individual states to beat back a federal government out to impose its will. From the left wing, there's the belief that the Civil War was a conflict between the planter class and the proletariat. In each case, race as the main reason for the war is skillfully rewritten, or really written out. Slavery is rewritten too. Some white Christian apologists contend that black folk needed slavery to save their souls or to rescue their cultures. A contemporary twist on this argument radiates in thinkers like Dinesh D'Souza, who claims that American blacks brought here through slavery are now doing far better than their African kin. Some white critics argue that since blacks sold other blacks into slavery, bondage was a black man's problem, not a white man's burden. But revisionists would much rather describe the dehumanization of black folk as little more than a commercial transaction. It's another way of washing their hands of racial responsibility. The effort to rewrite history surfaces in how Malcolm X is treated in the mainstream. It hardly seems likely that the culture he fought with all his heart could be depended on to grasp his true meaning. Malcolm is often read as an apostle of violence, as a frightful figure consumed by destructive rage. Yet the truth is far more complex, and Malcolm was far more complicated. But isn't the autobiography of Malcolm X so enduringly appealing because it shows Malcolm giving up hatred as a means to racial justice? Now, Malcolm X believed in the liberation of black folk from the mental and psychological chains of white supremacy. He was not committed to nonviolence as a way of life or as a method of social strategy. He believed that such a commitment prevents the full realization of black emancipation. Yet he was not personally violent. As Ossie Davis says in his eulogy, responding to the claim that Malcolm preached hate and was a fanatic and a racist, quote, "Did you even talk to Brother Malcolm? Was he ever himself associated with violence or any public disturbance?" End quote. The rage that flowed in Malcolm's veins was the rage against a force of whiteness that aimed to wash its black kin from the face of the earth. The urge to rewrite black history occasionally gives way to the final stage of white racial grief, which is simply, when it comes to race, dilute it. That is, to argue that black stuff doesn't just plague black folk. To summarize, bad stuff happens to everyone. This argument surfaced in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, and that storm certainly hit black folk, but it hit white folk too. This is the sordid version of reverse American exceptionalism. It is the same Me Too impulse that flares in the bitter battle against affirmative action. Beloved, I can't help but notice that affirmative action is the bee in so many of your bonnets. You look around in your classrooms and you think every black person is there because they got an unfair shake from the system. You look at your job and you think that your black coworker got an unjust nod of approval from the powers that be. You never stop to think how the history of whiteness in America is one long scroll of affirmative action. You never stop to think that Babe Ruth never had to play the greatest players of his generation, just the greatest white players. You never stop to think that most of our presidents never rose to the top because they bested the competition, only just the white competition. White privilege is a self-selecting tool that keeps you from having to compete with the best. The history of white folk gaining access to Harvard, Princeton, or Yale is the history of white folk deciding ahead of the game that you are superior. You argue that slots in school should be reserved for your kin because, after all, they are smarter, more disciplined, better suited, and more deserving than inferior blacks. That's like concluding that the Cleveland Cavaliers can't possibly win the NBA championship because they're down 3-1 to the Golden State Warriors. Throw in the towel and call it a series. But they must play the series to determine the winner. Whiteness is having all the advantages on your side. The referee's blowing the whistle for you. The arena packed with only your fans. In fact, whiteness means you never even have to play the game at all, at least not in head-to-head matchups with the talent and skill of black folks. Here's We Cannot Stop by Michael Eric Dyson.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And greetings, my friends, patriots, lovers of democracy, truth, and justice, believers in peace, freedom, and the American way. Boy, a lot going on today. It's International Women's Day and International Women's Strike Day. I usually get my Ethiopian breakfast downstairs. It's entirely run by women, and it is closed. So it's interesting. I mean, this is just, all around us in D.C. It's a day without a woman. Your thoughts on that? But we've got a lot to cover today, and we will get to it. But in our first hour today, Congressman Marc Pocan is with us, taking your calls. So if there's anything that you would like to share with Congressman Pocan or ask him about, he will be here for the hour. Our number is 202-808-9925. Congressman Pocan represents the 2nd District of Wisconsin. Pocan.house.gov is his website. You can tweet him at Rep. Marc Pocan. And, of course, he is the first vice chair of the House Progressive Caucus as well. Do I have that all right, Congressman?
All perfect, Tom. Thank
Great.
you. Glad to be here.
Thank you for being with us today.
Of course.
So I just want to share with you real quickly my take on what's going on with the Republicans and their health care bill. And then I'd love to get your take, your thoughts, tell us what's going on in Congress and all this kind of thing. But it seems to me, and by the way, this is not the only thing that they're having to do this with. They're having to do this with the Iran deal. They're having to do this with a number of things that basically right-wing media and right-wing politicians lied to us for 7 years about the Affordable Care Act. They came up with all, just like they've been doing since 1935 about Social Security and since 1966 about Medicare. Oh, it's going to crash any day. It's going to die. It's going to kill. It's job killing. It's a terrible thing. And the poor suckers who watch Fox News and listen to right-wing hate radio believed those lies and elected these people to Congress based on those lies. And now they've got power, and they're looking around going, okay, we convinced these people that this thing is terrible, even though it was the Republican plan. It was put forward by the Heritage Foundation. Mitt Romney put it into place in Massachusetts. Richard Nixon proposed a very, very slightly different variation of it in '72. This was the Republican plan. They should have just embraced it, but now they've got to destroy their own plan, and they have no alternative because this was the Republican plan. The Democratic plan was single payer. And so now they've got to do something to make it look like they're doing something because they've got still so many people who believe their lies. But at the same time, increasingly Republican voters are realizing, at least if they can get out of the Fox bubble for 15 minutes, that they've been lied to. So anyhow, your thoughts, Congressman.
Well put, Tom. I agree with everything you said. This is something that they've been attacking, and then only recently, when I think they realize they're now in charge of everything, they have no excuses, no one to blame. They have to address this, and now suddenly, one of the very positive byproducts of what happened through this process was now I think it's generally accepted among the vast majority of people that if you have a pre-existing condition, you should still have access to health care. And there shouldn't be lifetime caps on your health care, and that adult children stay on and women pay the same as men. And some of these things now have become general truisms out there, which is great. Problem is, they just said how terrible it was, it's going to implode any minute, all this, and now they have to try to put something together, which clearly for 6 years they didn't, because it's not easy, as we were told last week by President Trump. He's realizing how difficult this is. And then, for them to put a plan out there that still in some ways resembles the parts that the public supports of the Affordable Care Act, but really doing it in a way to try to make it so that the wealthiest pay less in taxes, and we're going to wind up having less care, and it's really going to hurt, I think, older Americans the most out of this plan. They're having to implode because the far right wants to live up to the promise that they made over the last 6 years, which is this is terrible and awful, and they don't want to accept any of it. And now Paul Ryan's trying to put something out there. Even the president said, well, there's a phase 2 and 3 of this. And they have no idea what they're doing ultimately, but they're rushing it through. That's the other thing to note, Tom. I mean, 2 committees today are marking this up. Next week it goes to the Budget Committee. We should have, though, a CBO score next week for it, which is very important to tell us what it's really going to do and how it's going to hurt a lot of people. And then the following week they want to have it done on the floor before we take a break for April. So, unlike when we had the Affordable Care Act, I think the House had about 79 different bipartisan hearings and markups. They, spent a lot of time having testimony and debate. In the Senate, I think they had 53 hearings. I mean, this is just happening without any hearings. They're just trying to ram this through, again, contrary to all their complaints about the Affordable Care Act. So I think what we're seeing is that vast hypocrisy you talked about, but also we're seeing why it's so difficult among the Republicans to do anything, because while some Republicans may now generally understand that if you are sick, you need health care, there are some who still think, too bad, so sad, you're on your own, and they're going to have a hard time getting this through.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's one other piece to this, it seems, and that is back if you Google Rubio health corridors, or risk corridors, excuse me, what comes up as the top story is this piece by Robert Pear in December of 2015. Mm-hmm. Headlined, Marco Rubio quietly undermines Affordable Care Act. Part of the Affordable Care Act was the realization that if you're going to force insurance companies to take people who have pre-existing conditions and who didn't have insurance before, they're going to lose money for at least a couple of years until that stuff gets worked out and those people get healed and get well. And so for the first decade of Obamacare, there was this thing called risk corridors, which was basically the federal government. Every year, the insurance companies would come to the federal government and say, okay, we lost, $400 million last year. And the federal government would write them a check for $400 million and say, okay, here, we're going to make you whole because, at the end of a decade, all this is going to work out. And Rubio, this is from the article in the New York Times, a little-known health care provision slipped into a giant spending law last year, has tangled up the Obama administration, sent tremors through health insurance markets, and rattled confidence in the durability of President Obama's signature health law. By doing away with those risk corridors in December of 2015, knowing that that would take effect in October of 2016, when the new federal year begins, which is the month before the election, that when that went into effect, all these insurance companies are going to have to raise their rates 20 or 30% because they've got to make up their own risk corridors.
Or step away from the plan.
That's exactly right. And that's exactly what happened. And this was done by Republicans. And why is the Democratic Party not shouting this from the rooftops?
I think right now there's a fire hose of things you can go after on the Affordable Care Act, and I think that's what people are dealing with in the committees today and everything else. Tom, I look at it this way. Is this perhaps our opening, and I think it was what we're going to do from the Progressive Caucus perspective, of saying, look, if we just had a Medicare for All system, it would address all of these issues comprehensively without having to worry about who's making this little bit of profit and who's being subsidized, and all the issues that are out there all get covered if you have a comprehensive system that covers everyone. And you know what? To me, as a progressive, I welcome adding this to the debate because part of with the Affordable Care Act, this kind of left the public debate, and now we can come back to maybe doing it right in the very best way, which I would argue is Medicare for all.
I totally agree. And two magic numbers. I forget the hospital. I think it's the Albert Einstein Hospital in New York City. There's a hospital in New York that's identical in size and within 10 rooms of the same size as a hospital in Toronto. And the hospital in New York City has an entire floor devoted to billing. The hospital in Toronto has one office with one desk in it that two people each share that does all the billing for the hospital. If we got rid of all the paperwork associated with all these different health insurance companies and just went to single payer like Canada has done, we save $154 billion a year in doctors' offices, hospitals, insurance companies, everybody, having to do all this paperwork, number one. And number two, if you then also take out the marketing costs, the administrative costs, the mere existence costs, and the profit costs of having for-profit health insurance companies in the marketplace, and you take that out and add that to the $154 billion that you save from just paperwork, you save $508 billion a year. That's almost the Pentagon budget that we're spending just to support the existence of health insurance companies that, in my opinion, have no right to exist.
So for fun, Tom, our last vacation, my husband Phil and I went on, we were down in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico, in a part that is very heavily Canadian. And every Canadian we went up to, we got to know, we said, oh, God, your healthcare system's so bad, right? And they just look at you like, you grew another head while you're having a conversation with them. I mean, clearly, that is a great example from a country that is, so similar, especially when you're from Wisconsin. I mean, they're extremely similar to us.
That's next door.
Yeah, it's a great comparison. And don't forget the auto industry. Making a car in Canada or in Detroit, and an additional cost that we have here because of how we do our healthcare system puts us in a negative manner for competition when you come to the free market.
Yeah, it's in fact, Toyota did the math, and then they said when they decided to move that factory, this was like 8 or 10 years ago, to Canada, instead of they were bidding 3 states against each other, they said it was $2,400 per car for health insurance. That's crazy. Congressman Marc Pocan with us. He'll be taking your calls next.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
So give us a shout. Congressman Pocan is here for the hour. You can reach him at pocan.house.gov, or you can tweet him at repmark, M-A-R-K, Pocan, P-O-C-A-N. We'll be right back. And welcome back. Jeff, watching Free Speech TV on the Dish Network in Fort Dodge, Iowa. Jeff, you are on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hi, Tom. Thank you. Congressman Pocan, our Governor Branstad just signed a bill that was passed by our Republican House and Senate that virtually stripped the state workers union of just about all their rights. Now they're attacking like health benefits. Could you tell me, Governor Branstad was signing the thing, and there was a representative from Americans for Prosperity there, with all of them with big smiles on their face. And Governor Branstad said that we should refer to Wisconsin and Governor Walker how wonderful for the state of Wisconsin this was. Could you kind of pass on to Iowans what we have to look for by doing the things that Wisconsin did?
Absolutely, Jeff. Thank you for that question. I actually taped a video to legislators in Iowa as you were considering this bill saying, hey, I know Scott Walker came down there and told you how great it is. Here's the reality in Wisconsin. We've got one of the lowest job growth numbers in the upper Midwest. We have the 4th worst roads in the entire country. We've gutted our schools to the point that we have 1/3 of teachers turning over in a year at some of our schools in Wisconsin.
Wow.
People leaving the profession. In fact, our School of Education had, I believe it was almost a 50% drop in people applying to it, even though it's one of the best schools for education in a public institution in the entire country. Huge decline because of how we now treat teachers and our public employees. I mean, look at the roads. If we're not putting money back into roads, a lot of those folks are the people who plow our roads in Iowa and Wisconsin when we have snow in winter. I mean, up and down the line, it has had disastrous effects. It's easy to blame someone. You want to blame someone, but let's remember, Americans for Prosperity is really Americans for some people's prosperity. It's just a few rich folk who want to make sure that they're taken care of and not the rest of us. So when Scott Walker came and said what a great job he did in Wisconsin, I taped that video giving all those stats about the state that I love, Wisconsin, and to watch us be so bad off right now when it comes to K-12 education, when it comes to our roads, comes to our jobs growth. I mean, all this is directly related to the terrible measures that we put forth when we did our bill, which was called Act 10, but we refer to as the period of the uprising back home when that happened. I was still in the state legislature when it happened, Jeff. So this is bad stuff that you're about to do. You're going to see some very negative impacts, and now you just got to make sure that they don't do the next step, which is start taking your public education dollars and try to put them to private schools, because you're already going to be losing teachers and having turnover because of the measures you just passed. You'll make it even worse if you follow us in that line.
Wow. Sam Brownback did something like this in Kansas. He seems to be walking it back now since it's destroyed his state.
These are terrible ideas with short-term thinking. But, in Wisconsin, you got to remember, Tom, Scott Walker doesn't really want to be governor. He's never wanted to be governor of Wisconsin. He's wanted to be emperor of president. He's always wanted to be the top spot, and he's wanted to run for president since he probably was an Eagle Scout. And, we've been on his ladder to success, but he's done all these measures that look good when you run in Republican primaries around the country, but they've had devastating impacts in Wisconsin, and that's even coming from Republicans that I talked to.
Remarkable. Congressman Marc Pocan with us for the hour, taking your calls. We'll be back with more of your calls for Congressman Pocan right after this. You can tweet him at Rep. Marc Pocan, and his website is Pocan, POCAN.house.gov. We'll be right back.
This year's election results have generated fear, sadness, and despair.
In the days and months ahead,
our democracy may face a crisis of historic proportions.
But there is good news.
There is good news.
There is good news. Thousands of people are stepping forward in solidarity, resistance,
and resolve.
We join them.
We join them.
We join them.
In standing with the most vulnerable communities among us.
Those most likely to be targeted by new restrictions and policies.
We will tell their stories here.
Here
on Free Speech TV.
We will lift their voices here
on Free Speech TV.
In the difficult times ahead, know that we will be with you
24 hours a day.
Every day.
You are not alone.
You are not alone.
You are not alone.
There are millions of us.
Raising our voices and hearts together as one.
We've got your back.
We got your back.
Free Speech TV's got your back.
The revolution is in progress.
Welcome back. Congressman Marc Pocan taking your calls, and Vi in Doniphan, Missouri. Am I saying that right, Vi?
Yeah, you are. I like Obamacare. Is it too late to put those risk orders back in?
Well, our battle right now is to try to keep whatever we can keep of the Affordable Care Act, because at the rate that Paul Ryan wants to go, he's trying to get this done 2 weeks from now, give or take maybe 24 hours. He plans on having this initial proposal he has pass the House of Representatives. Now, he's going to have a lot of problems among his more conservative members here. He's going to have problems in the Senate. I think 4 people the first day, Republicans in the Senate, said they didn't support the measure because it's going to hurt states, especially around the Medicaid cuts. So, honestly, we could debate elements of the Affordable Care Act right now. The problem that we're going to have is, how you, as they try to get rid of it, repeal it, and come up with whatever they're trying to call a replacement, that we protect so many provisions of it, because the provisions that we're seeing go away that are, I think, the most onerous are the fact you're going to pay more for less coverage, and especially if you're an older American, the amount that they're going to give you as a subsidy isn't even close to what you're going to need, and those are the people that are going to be most at risk.
Yeah, there you go. So, in other words, this is just a great opportunity to push for single-payer health care. The time has come.
Every single time we look at one of these provisions and the problems they're having and why they don't accomplish even what the Affordable Care Act didn't accomplish, which is still a lot, where there were some holes, it comes back to why not have a Medicare for all sort of system? Yeah. Why not have a system that is more comprehensive, with less cost and less bureaucracy.
Right. Why waste $500 billion a year?
Absolutely.
McWayne in Chino Valley, Arizona. You're on the air with Congressman Marc Pocan.
Yes, Congressman. It seems to me all of the Republicans' arrogance and maliciousness in their legislation and policies is fueled by the art of the steal, the actual theft of our democracy. I'm just wondering, where is the Democratic Party's outrage over an investigation into Koch's Crosscheck system?
Yeah, I'll tell you, there's a bunch of things we are pushing right now, Wayne. The frustration I have from someone who, spent a lot of time in a state legislature before coming to Congress is, it's said here only if someone in the media decides to report it, so you don't necessarily know what we're all pushing for. And, whether it be on simple things like the whole connections with the interference in elections with the Russians to things like why don't we have a system for redistricting that's a public system across the country? And there are bills put forward to try to do that. How do you get our democracy back by making sure that everyone truly has a right to vote, which is a bill that Keith Ellison and I have, which is a constitutional amendment. Clearly, the interstate crosscheck falls in the line. We have a separate committee led by John Sarbanes of Maryland who's dealing with ethics and election reform, and that's one of the components that we're trying to put out there on a regular basis. So we are putting out the issues because I completely agree with you. I mean, at stake really is our democracy, and a lot of these issues affect that democracy. But the bottom line is, how do you maintain a democracy where your vote matters and they're not trying to do everything they can to try to pick their voters rather than the other way around? So there are measures happening, at least on the House side. I can't speak specifically on the Senate, but I'm sure they are. Our biggest challenge, and I have this very often, is if it doesn't get picked up what we do, first of all, we got to be more creative and get that message out. We're trying to do it, but to make sure that people really understand the extent of the threat to their democracy that's out there.
Yeah, and interstate crosscheck certainly qualifies. We just have a minute before the break, Congressman, so not enough time to get a question on. But I'm curious. It seems that one of the things that Trump is teaching us is that performance art gets coverage. In his case, it's outrage and BS and outrageous claims. The billionaires for Bush were funny. I mean, have you guys ever had discussions about how can we do performance art that'll get attention? Because I get the press releases from the House Progressive Caucus, and you guys are doing great stuff. Nobody knows about it.
Yeah, I'd say it is a challenge here because one of the things I've noticed in my little time, our ways of protesting, and when I say our ways, overall the Democratic, I think our caucus's ways have been to do these conga lines that delay action, or we go and move adjournment.
Yeah.
And quite honestly, they're the amoebas of protest, right? And they're not getting attention.
Yeah, I think Grayson had it figured out, just be outrageous.
When we took over the chamber and did an all-night sit-in around gun violence, we got a lot of attention. And I think a lot of us are arguing for doing more of that. I think there's been some resistance by some in our caucus, but I live in the theory of you do it and you ask and you apologize later rather than asking for permission first. Right. And I think we need to do more of that.
Okay. Congressman Marc Pocan with us for the hour, taking your calls. His website, pocan.house.gov, P-O-C-A-N. You can tweet him at Rep. Marc Pocan. His personal Twitter is just Marc Pocan, M-A-R-K, P-O-C-A-N. And we'll be back with more of your calls for the Congressman right after this.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
We'll be back in about 5 minutes after this news break here at the bottom of the hour. Stick around. Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from The Crash of 2016, one of my favorites. In her writings, this is from page 62, by the way, a middle-class primer is the chapter title. In her writings, which have become foundational for libertarian theology, author Ayn Rand suggested that the only purpose of government should be to prevent oppression by force. What she neglected to consider was all the force inherent in nature. If you're hungry, there is the force of biology. If you're homeless, you confront the force of winds, storms, ice, and rain. If you're sick, you confront the ravages and force of disease.
These were the forces that provoked the first governments, the first communities, the first clans and tribes, the first nation states. It's easy for libertarian elitists, such as multimillionaire TV talking heads or college kids reading Atlas Shrugged, to talk about how there should be no government beyond police, the army, and courts. They all have enough resources that they don't need to deal with the forces of raw nature. And that explains why billionaires would bankroll libertarian-leaning think tanks that will, when the crash comes with its full force, tell us it was caused by big government. However, in the real world, humans must confront both nature and other humans, which is why we create governments and why we create economies. But it wasn't until 1776 when Thomas Jefferson placed John Locke's right to life, liberty, and property, or replaced it, with life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that the idea of a large class of working people have the ability to pursue happiness, the middle class. It wasn't until 1776 that that was even seriously considered as a cornerstone obligation to government. This is also the first time in history that the word happiness had ever appeared in any nation's formative documents, as Jefferson wrote in 1817 to Dr. John Manners, quote, "The evidence of this natural right, like that to our right of life, liberty, the use of our faculties, the pursuit of happiness is not left to the feeble and sophisticated investigations of reason, but is impressed on the sense of every man." As Jefferson realized, with no government interference by setting the rules of the game of business and fair taxation, there could be no broad middle class, maybe a sliver of small business and artisans, but the vast majority of us would be the working poor under the yoke of elites. The economic royalists know this, which gets to the root of why they set out to destroy government's involvement in the economy. After all, in a middle-class economy, they may have to give up some of their power, and some of the higher end of their wealth may even be redistributed, horrors of horrors, for schools, parks, libraries, and other things that support a healthy middle-class society but are not needed by the rich, who live in a parallel but separate world from the rest of us. As Jefferson laid out in his 1816 letter to Samuel Kercheval, a totally free market where corporations reign supreme, just like the oppressive governments of old, could transform America, quote, "until the bulk of the society is reduced to be mere automatons of misery, to have no sensibilities left but for sinning and suffering. Then begins indeed the bella omnium in omnia, which some philosophers observing to be so general in this world have mistaken it for the natural instead of the abusive state of man." Although this may come as a sudden realization to many, we've really known it all our lives. In fact, in the 6,000-year history of the civilized world, a middle class emerging in any nation has been such a rarity as to be largely historically invisible. The United States has had two great periods of what we today call a middle class. The first was from the 1700s to the mid-1800s and was fueled by virtually free land for settlers, stolen from the Indians, and free labor, slavery in the South and indentured immigrants in the North. The result was, as de Tocqueville pointed out, the most well-educated, politically active, middle-class non-aristocrats in the world. The second period didn't take hold until after World War II, during my dad's lifetime. Unlike the first, which was fueled by free land and slaves, the second had to be carefully constructed with specific and what some might define as socialist policies put in place during the New Deal, which asserted more democratic control over the economy and workplace in order to keep the economic royalists in check. To both stimulate and balance the domestic economy, FDR reinstituted progressive taxation, which gave workers more to spend and gave the rich an incentive to pay their workers better to maintain a stable workplace, since if they took the money themselves, it would just mostly go to taxes, thus stimulating demand for more goods and services. Progressive taxation has a long history. As Jefferson said in a 1785 letter to James Madison, quote, "Another means of silently lessening the inequality of property is to exempt from taxation all below a certain point and to tax the higher portions of property in geometrical progression as they rise." FDR eventually hiked the top income tax rate paid by the super rich in America to 90%. This had a twofold effect. First, it held income inequality in check and ushered in an era of equal income and a growth among all classes. Unlike the Gilded Age, when the economy grew at a blistering pace but the gains were afforded only to the robber barons, the period between 1947 and 1980 saw unparalleled equitable growth. During these 30-plus years, the poorest fifth in America saw a 116% increase in their incomes. The middle fifth, 111% increase. Top 5% only saw an 85% increase.
All income classes shared in the prosperity of the times when the top marginal income tax rate was above 70%. The second effect of a high income tax rate was to bring stability to the economy. And then it goes through the whole explanation of how that worked. The book is The Crash of 2016.
Hey, want to hear that clip again? Subscribe to the Thom Hartmann program on YouTube to see all your favorite show highlights.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and Congressman Marc Pocan on the line with us, taking your calls. You're still here, Congressman?
I'm here.
Okay. Patricia in Portage, Wisconsin. You are on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Okay, you guys. I'm a woman, so indulge me a little. Congressman Pocan, I write for the Capital Times newspaper on wildlife issues, and I bet you've never realized that our state and federal agencies that manage wildlife are almost exclusively funded on killing licenses. That makes them killing businesses. So I just wrote a column that 2/3 of wildlife and all life, amphibians, insects, you name it, has been destroyed on this planet in 50 years. 2/3 gone. 1/3 left. The Vatican just met on this issue, and we need it on the Progressive Caucus, and we need it determining whether we accept resolutions like 89 and 16 that are coming out of the environmental committees to kill bears and cubs and wolves in their dens with their pups and open more wildlife refuges and destroy the last third. I mean, we really need this on the progressive or democratic platform, and we need our legislators to lead on this instead of allowing. They've doubled trapping in Wisconsin. They're raping out our woods to the Toronto market. We are in real trouble with disease replacing wildlife.
No, Patricia, you've been a very articulate spokesperson on these issues, and I appreciate the work you're doing, from the issues of delisting gray wolves to bear hunting to one that just yesterday I think we're going to be taking a leadership position on, which is the slaughter of horses in this country to sell the meat overseas. There are many issues that we need to deal to make sure that we're taking care of this animal cruelty, and I so appreciate the work you're doing back home on this.
Mary in Redondo Beach, California. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Thank you. Hi, this is Mary Roderick calling. I have an issue here that would come up with the representative in general, and that is whether or not it's illegal to lie to Congress when you're under oath or not under oath. And I found a source, and I wanted to call that in. And I'm pretty sure you already know it, but I just wanted to make sure. It concerns, the title is What Happens If You Lie to Congress. And, of course, if you're under oath, you refer to Section 18, 1621, and 1001 of Title 18, not Section 18, Title 18 of the U.S. Code. 1621, we already know if you're under oath, that's against the law. But here, Section 1001 covers false statements more generally without requiring an oath. And the section stipulates that, and this is a direct quote, whoever in any matter within the jurisdiction of the executive, legislative, or judicial branch of the government of the United States knowingly and willfully, unquote, falsifies or conceals information, including before a congressional committee's inquiry, may also be fined or imprisoned up to 5 years. And the same basically goes.
Mary, I'm sorry, I need to get more people in here, but is your question specifically about Tom Price and Scott Pruitt lying to Congress? Is that the essence of it?
You can throw a dartboard, pin in a dartboard, and hit one who has.
Okay. All right. Let's get the congressman's response. Thank you, Mary.
Mary, thanks for your question, and you bring up something I think that is very perceptive on what happened this weekend. Clearly, Jeff Sessions lied under oath. We now know. In fact, interestingly, he offered up his lie. He didn't even answer a question that way. He kind of offered up a lie about what contact he had with Russian officials. And as we have heard from multiple accounts, President Trump was extremely angry with the fact that he recused himself because he had to after that information came out. So what happened after that was a tweet storm, part Arnold Schwarzenegger, mostly Barack Obama, but going after Barack Obama, making this outrageous claim that somehow he's being wiretapped by Barack Obama, or his wires, I believe is what he said, were being tapped. And yet no one in the administration could justify this. To go back to the problem we have is it's the burden of proof. So I was explaining this weekend in Wisconsin. Inside the Beltway here, we use terms like perjury, and we talk about the actual ability to prosecute someone. It takes quite a bit. It has to be beyond a reasonable doubt, et cetera, depending on whether or not it's under oath or not. So it becomes very difficult to do that. In most parts of the country, it's just called lying. But, here we have fancy terms and fancy standards, which is why so many of these people get away with it. However, at least in the case of Jeff Sessions, now we have a recusal that puts us hopefully a step closer to independent investigation with a special prosecutor. But you're right, whether it be Secretary Price or Pruitt, when they lie to Congress, you want accountability. The difficulty we have here is that burden of proof to actually make it something enforceable. So we just have to make sure that, while inside the Beltway there may be certain levels that are hard to come by in going after them to putting, a real serious consequence to what they did, I think we can still win this war back home in making sure people understand that this administration is lying on a regular basis. And I don't know if, quite honestly, they know the difference between truth and lies sometimes when they put some of this information out there.
Tragically. Norma in Montgomery, Alabama. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Thank you, Dr. Tom. Representative Pocan, I heard an announcement the other day in which they were talking about this new health care plan will protect the market. Well, I resent being referred to as a market. I don't have any faith at all in the insurance companies because I have been a patient, a cardiac patient, since '81. And I have watched the payments to doctors through here in Alabama, it's Blue Cross, drop to where there's very, very little ever paid to a doctor from Blue Cross. Our Blue Cross CEO said that $21 million a year was inadequate in 2014. I did the math; that worked out to a little over $10,000 an hour.
This is his paycheck, you mean?
Sir?
This is his paycheck, Norma?
Yes.
Oh, pardon my interrupting you.
.com, if anybody wants to verify that. When the Affordable Care Act came out, our governor refused to expand Medicaid. We have had people dying, like you were talking about in New York and Los Angeles, from live active TB. There is no health care in the central western part of Alabama. There are no hospitals. Mm-hmm. And what I have heard is that any state that did not expand Medicaid will not be able to do so under this new health plan. Well, so far, like I said, I don't consider myself or my fellow citizens a market, and I am not concerned whether or not a CEO gets a paycheck at all. I don't need a health insurance policy. I need to be able to walk into my doctor's office and receive adequate, competent care, and that is what I want for my fellow citizens. I am, like Dr. Tom, I want Medicare for all. But do you know whether or not this new policy will prohibit these southern states, like the old Confederacy, from expanding Medicaid and helping people with no health care? Our governor is in the hospital today receiving a procedure out of my tax dollars for an irregular heart. And meanwhile, we have people dying. Personally, if I'd had a family member die, I would have him arrested for murder. But But can you answer my question? Do you know whether or not this new policy will prevent southern states from expanding Medicaid?
Well, Norma, so yes, part of what this is going to do is going to really affect people when it comes to Medicaid, and specifically you're seeing the states that use this the most right now that have it are states that, quite honestly, are represented by Republicans when we're looking at some of the breakout in numbers. So people are going to be voting against the best interests of their constituents because they just don't believe fundamentally in programs like Medicaid and I would argue Medicare and Social Security as well. So absolutely, this will have negative ramifications on states when it comes to Medicaid, and we're already seeing that's by 4 of the, I think, U.S. senators, Republican U.S. senators, the first day came out because they are kind of looking out for their constituents and see this as a problem. One extra thing, Tom, if I can just say, from Norma's numbers about that insurance exec who's making $10,000 an hour, if you think about it, in about a day and a half of work, they quit paying into Social Security.
Wow.
Where the rest of us pay, the entire year into Social Security to make that program strong. That's a great irony of when she mentioned the amount of money they're making and the reality when it comes to health care.
Right. That's extraordinary. Congressman Marc Pocan is with us, taking your calls for the hour. We'll be back with more of your calls for Congressman Pocan in just a moment. His website, pocan.house.gov. You can tweet him at Rep Marc Pocan, REPMARKPOCAN.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Right back with more of your calls for Congressman Pocan. And welcome back. David in, is it Rifle, Colorado? David?
That's right.
Hey, thanks for watching Free Speech TV. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Good morning, Tom, and good morning, Congressman Pocan.
Good morning, David.
I just wanted to chime in on the Medicare for All issue. On Monday, Tom was out of town and had Alex Lawson, the Social Security worker, sitting in for him. And he made the statement that now is the time to fight uncompromisingly for Medicare for all. We can talk about the ways of implementing it, but we need to stand firm on that one simple issue. And I just wanted to add my 2 cents that that's what I'd like to see happen.
David, I agree. I mean, I think what you're going to see, not just this week, because this is a couple committees doing a markup, and we just finally saw the language this week of what their alleged proposal to be an alternative is, but the fact that this is going to go for, I would argue, weeks and months, because this is not going to be easy, and there are going to be phases, and they're going to realize things don't work out. And when we get that CBO score next week, you're going to see exactly who the losers are, and there's going to be a lot of losers under their plan. So I would argue just what you're saying is let's make sure that not only do we constantly talk about this through this debate, but I think we can make this an issue in the 2018 and 2020 election cycles. Even though the Republicans are in charge of Congress and there's zero chance that it'll pass during this session, we can start to make the argument and the case for why this is the proper way and actually hold candidates accountable that this is the best alternative that could be out there for us.
There you go. Michael in Winter Haven, Florida. You are watching Free Speech on DirecTV. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan. We just have 90 seconds to the break. Michael, real quick question, please.
Yes. In 72, Thomas Eagleton had to step down as George McGovern's running mate because of psychological problems he had in the past. If a candidate for vice president has to do that, can Congress require the president to at least get some to review his psychological state?
Michael, so first of all, I think many of us would argue now, with much more information, I think, than they had in 72, that, hopefully Eagleton never should have had to step down for what they were attempting to say about him. But I do think that in this particular situation right now where we're at, more and more people, and it's not just partisans who are saying this, are concerned about the mental health of the president. And I know that Ted Lieu, one of my colleagues from L.A., has actually introduced a bill to say, let's at least have someone who can provide mental health services at the White House level and have some capacity to be exploring the problems we're having. And then just this weekend, I've seen people who have not gone down this path before starting to really seriously question his stability. When you accuse the former president of wiretapping you based on, from what we can best understand, either a Breitbart article or the fact that maybe there is some kind of actual intelligence, although we can't find it yet, a review because he may be in violation of a law from what he was doing during the campaign. Either way, he hasn't put anything forward yet. He wants us to investigate it. We're starting to see an instability there that I think is of great concern.
Yeah. We'll be right back with more of your calls for Congressman Marc Pocan in just a moment. Stick around. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And Gary in Washington, D.C., listening on Sirius XM. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hello, this is Gary.
Hey, Gary, you're on the air.
Oh, okay. Hey, look, I'm going to give you a quick story. I've been paying into the healthcare system since I was 19 years old. I'm now 70. I started working for the United States Postal Service when I was 19, and I paid in for basically 47 years into healthcare, except for the 4 years I was in the military. It seems to me that a lot of people didn't get in the common sense line. Healthcare was very inexpensive for me. I really didn't need it, but I got it. And I don't understand when you have more people paying into the system, it's going to work out. It's going to be cheaper for everybody. Now that I'm older, I'm going to start, utilizing it more. But I just don't understand why the common sense issue is people miss the common sense issue. More people, cheaper rates.
Gary, you're right. There's no question. That's why I think Medicare works so well for the populations that get Medicare, why the VA hospital works so well for our veterans, and that's what would work best for the healthcare system. The Affordable Care Act made some really important standards, like the fact that about pre-existing conditions and lifetime caps, et cetera, that are important, that now I think are kind of accepted as universals that you have to have. But, the fact that this Republican plan is going to make things more costly, especially for older Americans, provide less coverage, that's not health care. We're going backwards. We're not going forward. And going forward is finding a system that makes sure that everyone has access to health care, and let's make it more affordable by doing it smarter, which is, I think, what you're suggesting, Gary. Thank you.
Ken in Great Falls, Montana. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Yeah, thanks for taking my call. As the single payer system is the holy grail for us progressives, also the carbon tax would be far better than the clean power plan. And there's a bunch of Republicans pushing a carbon tax. And I'm wondering if the progressive caucus is looking at this and is going to get behind a carbon tax again. That we really need to go that route.
Yeah, Ken, thanks for your question. So there are a couple carbon tax proposals out there. And there are some deficiencies in the Republican one that don't go as far as I think the one that I've seen put forward by some Democrats. However, I do think just to the issue in general, there are some conservative think tanks that are in support of carbon tax for I think the same reasons that you are, which is that let's make sure that if people are putting carbon out, they're the ones paying for it, and that might help encourage them to have different behaviors, to invest in other ways to have less pollution and still produce the energy they need to. So a carbon tax in and of itself, I am a strong proponent. I think there are some deficiencies in the Republican bill that don't go in the correct direction. However, this is something because there is some potential for left and right support because it's someone who's generating the carbon should pay for it, not all of us, that I think has some promise, and we definitely need to keep it on the table.
Hey. Anna in Elk River, Minnesota, listening on AM 950. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hi there. I have just a quick anecdote about national health care and then a question for the congressman. I talked to a guy in his 70s from Norway. He's lived here for quite a few years. He describes himself as an independent. He doesn't think either side should be having ultimate power, but he said he wishes he could go back to Norway because their health care system is wonderful. You go to the doctor, period. It's all paid for. His two points on that were that their taxes, he estimated, income taxes were between 40 and 50%. It's horrifying to us. But his other point was that they wouldn't work for the wages, and they don't work for the wages that we as Americans work for. A $40,000 a year, for example, driving job is unheard of over there. So my two-part question is, why aren't you Democrats talking about a national health care, not Medicare for all, because that still involves the insurance companies? Why aren't you talking about national health care, giving us information and facts about why you don't think that will work? I mean, why can't we take the health insurance burden away from employers, raise wages? I know that sounds simplistic, but why not? Why aren't you talking about that? Why are you constantly compromising away what really should be when it works around the globe? Why won't it work here?
Let's let the congressman answer.
Sure. Well, I think some of us are. I mean, I think that's the point. I think a lot of us in the Progressive Caucus are saying single payer is the system that we have wanted all along. The problem is within the broader picture when they passed the Affordable Care Act, there weren't enough votes for it. We actually had a public option, and it fell away in the Senate, unfortunately, when that passed. So I think there are a number of us who are advocating for it, but I think I'll refer to what I said earlier. You know, the problem is if the press doesn't pick it up, it doesn't necessarily get the attention. And even though there's bills introduced in Congress to do this, and we're working towards it, and I think what I'm saying today is exactly in alignment with what you're saying on it, it's been more difficult to get it to the forefront. I think, though, this debate right now is going to bring this to the forefront. This is exactly what we needed, is to realize that this isn't easy, as the president said last week, and there's a reason why, because it is so convoluted with the current system we have with all the insurance companies and other middle companies in between taking little bits and pieces. So we have, in our Progressive Caucus budget, once again, we will put that part about single payer as one of the major provisions in the caucus budget. And last time we put it that we got a vote, we got a majority of Democrats in the House to vote for it. So it's certainly out there. It's just sometimes it's harder to get through the clutter of the mass media.
Ramona in Gainesville, Florida. Ramona, we have only 2 minutes till the end of this hour. So a quick question for Congressman Pocan.
Yes, sir. I've never heard this brought up before, but wouldn't it save small businesses and big businesses a lot of money to have universal health care, because we would no longer need workman's compensation insurance?
Yeah, you know, I'll tell you, there's so many things. If you think about how our current system works, Ramona, and I've been a small business owner of a small union printing firm since I was 23 years old, so 29 years now. When you look at what we have to, that could otherwise go to salary, that it goes to benefits, it's been an increasing portion of costs. Before the Affordable Care Act, we, on a regular basis, had 20% increases in those health care costs that we have. And then we saw the part where now people pay bigger and bigger chunks every month, the co-pays, into that monthly premium. And you're also seeing people's deductibles go up. So at some point, you've got to figure out how to address it the best. And this is an expense for big and small business. So when Tom and I, refer to the auto industry and the fact that it's $2,400 a car is just their share of healthcare costs, which makes us less competitive, I would also argue as a small business owner, that's a big chunk that goes out in health insurance that otherwise could be other compensation for employees. And, quite honestly, we already pay into a lot of things for our taxes. We could do this much more efficiently if we had that single-payer system rather than the current system we have, because a lot of that money I'm paying out for health insurance isn't going to health care, and it could be far more effectively used.
But the insurance companies are fighting it, and as she pointed out, the workman's comp insurance companies are going to fight it too.
Absolutely, and there's all sorts of things. If we actually did the math, and I'm sure it's out there, our organization has done this, that is a really strong argument. I would agree from a small business perspective of why this makes sense.
Yeah, I agree. This radio show is a small business, and we provide all of our full-time employees with really good health insurance, and we still have to pay into workman's comp and everything else. And well, you know this, Congressman. Yeah. You run a print shop there in Wisconsin. Congressman Marc Pocan, thanks so much for being with us today.
Of course, Tom. Thank you.
It is always a pleasure talking with you. You can find Congressman Pocan's website at pocan.house.gov. You can tweet him at @RepMarcPocan. And we'll be back in the next hour with Charles Sauer.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
Welcome to the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from The Last Hours of Ancient Sunlight. With few exceptions, but this is page 176. With few exceptions, most Native American cultures did not have our notions as part of their collective mythos. Instead of the story that we're separate from creation and born to dominate it, these older cultures held a different view of the place of humans in the order of creation. They believe we are part of the world. We are made of the same flesh as other animals. We eat the same plants. We share the same air, water, soil, and food with every other life form on the planet. We are born into life by the same means as other mammals, and when we die, like them, we become part of the soil that will nourish future generations. They also believe it is our destiny to cooperate with the rest of creation. Every life form has its special purpose in the grand ecosystem, and all are to be respected, they believed. Each animal and plant has its own unique intelligence and spirit. We are permitted to compete with other plants and animals, but we may not wantonly destroy them. All life is absolutely as sacred as human life. Although hunting and killing for food are part of nature's order, when we do so, it must be done with respect and thankfulness. Older cultures are most often cooperators, not dominators. There are human cultures who do not engage in the destruction of the world. They demonstrate that destruction and domination are not an inevitable part of human nature. Prior to the emergence of younger cultures about 7,000 years ago, the anthropological record shows that not one culture believed itself to be separate from and superior to nature. We find the remnants of these older cultures in tribal people around the world, such as the San, the Kogi, the Ik of Uganda, the Navajo, the Hopi, the Cree, the Ojibwa, living in harmony with the world around them, the people around them, and seeing all life as sacred. The San Bushmen don't even qualify as Stone Age, since they've never used stone implements, only tools made from wood. And yet they were successfully pursuing their way of life 40,000 years before Aristotle, and they still are. They leave behind few traces, as they are such masters of resource management. That's sustainability. And contrary to the stories of our culture, it was and is often a happy and comfortable life. When we lived like that thousands of years ago, we enjoyed cradle-to-grave security. The tribe took care of itself. We cared for one another. If anybody had food, everybody had food. If anybody had a diseased child or an infirm parent, everybody had a diseased child or an infirm parent. The measure of wealth in such societies was security. Mediums of exchange like money were unnecessary. The idea of hoarding food or other things was unthinkable because everybody was responsible for everybody. Our ancient ancestors lived in the way of all other cooperator societies in nature, but be they the society of wolves or chimpanzees or prairie dogs, they looked out for one another. Our ancestors, people like you and me of all races and all continents, lived like this all over the world for 40 to 200,000 years, depending on whose archaeology you accept. And then there were eruptions among traditional cultures. In some parts of the world, people began to move away from their hunting and gathering lifestyle by experimenting with agriculture. This created more efficient food production, thus increasing their numbers and giving some people the ability to hoard food, the beginning of what we call wealth. Then a subgroup of the agriculturalists began experimenting with a new cultural idea of coercive or forced evangelism, of bringing others into their culture in a way that had never been done before. Their gods told them that if they couldn't evangelize others, then they should utterly destroy them. They were a very few, probably not more than a dozen tribes, which arose out of the tens of thousands of tribes that populated the planet. And this small number of tribes proceeded to wipe out and displace and destroy the thousands of other tribes who were living in a sustainable, peaceful, and connected to nature way. They left the garden and began to create dominating city-states and then empires. They were the first people infected with Wetiko, the origin of our younger culture. And because of this, they had become more efficient at increasing their own numbers. They had more sunlight under their own personal control. Of course, there was a price to pay for this. While the San, Kogi, Ik, and other native peoples may spend less than 2 to 4 hours a day gathering food and attending to the needs of life, and do to this day, by the way, in younger culture societies, this balance was radically shifted, as average people must work longer and harder just to survive. Those who were the dominating individuals in the culture, however, could live luxuriously and work less and less. So for every person who only worked an hour or two a day, another person would have to work 4 or 8 or 10 hours a day or more. Without massive exploitation of resources or theft from others, for every person with 10 times as much wealth, 10 people must have only 1/10 as much. Social and economic classes were born, and the first governments came into being to define, order, and control the socioeconomic structure, and help the wealthy maintain and increase their riches. Whether they knew it or not, these governments, mostly kingdoms in the early days, transmitted younger culture values to all citizens, rich and poor. The power brokers of this time programmed the consciousness of their subjects, just as our governments, educational institutions, and mass media do today. Nobody knows what brought about the first eruption of Wetiko cultural insanity, but logic suggests it was most likely happened in places where food resources were only cyclically abundant. For example, the Tlingit and Weda Native American tribes of the Pacific Northwest and the area around Vancouver Island were apparently extensive traders and owners of slaves. And this was because they could store food. This is where it all began, beginning wealth. Anyhow, the book is The Last Hours of Ancient Sunlight. This is just a small dip into it. The Thom Hartmann program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the organic wine company, ecowine.com.
The Thom Hartmann program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit freespeechbeets.com.
This is the Thom Hartmann program.
And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And in the studio with us is Charles Sauer, economist, president of the Market Institute, libertarian think tank, marketinstitute.org. You can tweet him at Charles Sauer, S-A-U-E-R. And Charles, welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
For our regular conversations. What I wanted to do with this today, rather than getting into, like what historically what we've done is take one particular wonky topic, like healthcare, and just like, okay, you've got a libertarian worldview, I've got a liberal worldview, let's compare and beat each other up or whatever. But I'm really interested in the larger thing. I mean, we saw this experiment in Kansas where Sam Brownback said, okay, we're going to do what the Koch brothers want. We're going to massively cut taxes on rich people. We're going to defund basically anything that has to do with poor people. We're going to cut funding to the schools, et cetera, et cetera. He did not obviously get a libertarian paradise in Kansas. And in fact, what happened is Kansas is now devastated as a result of this, and they're having to raise taxes and say, oops. And he said, this is a proof of Reaganomics. But I get it. Reaganomics is not a libertarian worldview. So what would America look like if your worldview, David Koch's worldview, the libertarian worldview were actually imposed on this country?
Increased GDP, increased employment, higher satisfaction with your quality of life, and less government intrusion into that quality of life. But let's go back to what Sam Brownback did in Kansas City. I'm from Kansas City. I grew up in Kansas. And what he did wasn't libertarian, right? He actually, what he did was inept leadership. And so he came after one proposal and they shut it down. And he goes, I'll tell you what, I know what they did in 1986. They came back with a stronger proposal and on Capitol Hill in 1986 tax reform. The second Capitol tax reform was a lower bill, good bill, went through fast. Sam Brownback tried to do that in Kansas City or in Kansas, and they accepted it, but he did it with no planning and no thought and no bridge. And so what has happened
In other words, what Bombeck did was stupid conservatism. It wasn't libertarianism.
It was stupid conservatism.
So you say that in a libertarian United States that we'll have higher GDP. Let's take these one at a time.
Okay.
How do we get higher GDP? GDP is driven by demand. Econ 101, Adam Smith. And how does doing away with consumer protections? I mean, basically, the libertarian doing away with consumer protections, doing away with the income tax, doing away with Social Security, doing away with Medicare, doing away with government involvement basically in our lives in any way. How does that cause the average person to have more money to buy stuff?
Well, that's fairly easy. There was when Obama came into office. Was it Obama? I don't know. They had the car buyback program. It might have been by Bush. It was bad policy where
No, that was Obama. The cash for clunkers.
Cash for clunkers. They bought the used cars, and what did they do? Did they give them to poor people? Did they allow people that couldn't afford a car to have a car and drive to work? No, they just trashed these cars. And
part of that was because those old cars were emitting 2-3 times the carbon dioxide that they should have been anyway. But what does that have to do with?
That's possible. All of the research that goes into that.
Without going back and finding one policy from Obama that you don't like. I'm talking, seriously, you're talking to somebody who if I lose my, if I no longer can send my kids to public schools, if I no longer can be protected from, whoever I put my retirement funds with ripping me off, and the banksters can do anything they want to me. If the doctors and hospitals, if there's no controls on them and on the insurance companies from ripping me off or denying me coverage, how is it that I have a better life? I don't understand this.
What I don't understand is how hard it must be to walk down the street every day as a liberal and think that the whole world is against you. And the thing is,
that's a straw man.
No.
Come on, I don't think the whole world's against me. I walk down the street and I go, this is a public street paid for with public taxes. You want to do away with public taxes and put toll roads on the street. How does that help me?
But you think the store owner is going to come out, run and put a Snickers bar in there?
I'm running a business right here.
Okay, but the guy underneath here is going to run down and put a Snickers bar in your pocket and make you pay for it. And then that Snickers bar might not have the right health quality. The fact is, when a market runs, markets actually have demand. And if you aren't getting that demand, in that case, then you are not making money. So you actually want to treat your customers well. An insurance company wants to take care of people so that people will keep coming
insurance
there.
Companies. My experience of insurance companies is that they will take any chance they can to rip me off. And I've been doing this for over 40 years.
And we make
having insurance companies say, "Oh no, we're not going to pay it," on the third time, particularly with United Healthcare. Sometimes you fight it 2-3 times.
And we make it really, really hard in the United States to change insurance companies. Right? You have to have employer-based insurance if you want to have an affordable insurance plan.
So if we do away with all these consumer protections, what's going to prevent them from ripping me off? Your utopian idea that they all just want me goodwill?
Look, no, people will actually pay attention because in any market you have charlatans, right? You have people
I don't
that
want to pay attention.
Okay,
I want the freedom to choose my doctor or my hospital, but I don't give a damn about the freedom to choose.
You want to pay the politician to pay attention for you. I'll tell you who doesn't have the incentive to pay attention for you, and that's a politician. The people that are in front of politicians are the corporate lobbyists that are in there every single day that are telling the politicians what to pay attention to.
And in a libertarian world, those lobbyists have even more power and influence.
No, they don't, because I have reduced the influence of government over anything that I deal with. And when I reduce the influence of government, now I pay attention for myself.
So rather than screwing us by lobbying for laws that are to their benefit, they just screw us directly.
Well, it's a lot harder to screw the populace than to just work through one person that can change a law and screw us off.
If you believe that, how did all these people vote for Donald Trump thinking that they were going to get a better health care plan?
They voted for Donald Trump because he said he was going to get government out of it. He was going to change us from Obamacare, which has doubled my premiums and reduced the quality of my health care.
Well, yeah, you can thank Marco Rubio for that. But
letting me go back onto a plan that might actually work.
Okay, so, Charles Koch's platform in 1980 when he ran for vice president, repeal all the federal campaign finance laws. So billionaires can own any politician they want.
That's
How
great.
is that a good thing?
Well, that's free speech, and it might be bad if the government runs everything, but if you reduce the size of government, it's good.
Okay, we favor the abolition of Medicare and Medicaid. So now you've got 30, 40 million people who are on Medicare right now, and another 26 million, I think, who are on Medicaid, and all of them now have no health insurance, and by the way, they have no money.
Well, look, people have become reliant on government. They've given up their decision-making to government. So if you do it without a bridge, you're correct. But if you do it with a bridge, there was a market.
What's the bridge?
It's whatever bridge.
You get a
let's call
refundable
it
tax credit
5, 10
when you
years.
have no income?
Let's call it 5, 10-year bridge to something where we have no Medicare, no Medicaid.
In other
Now,
words, so even though I paid into this for 40 some odd years, every year that goes by, you're gonna pay for less and less of my services.
I think there's a lot of good arguments for Medicaid. Actually, it's not a true libertarian idea.
He says we favor the repeal of the fraudulent, virtually bankrupt, and increasingly oppressive Social Security system. Pending that repeal, participation in Social Security should be made voluntary. How does that help America?
How does taking my paycheck money and investing it in a bridge to nowhere help America?
Social Security is not a bridge to nowhere. Social Security is a lifeline for people.
No, the money that the federal government spent on there's a biodome in Iowa that they spent my Social Security money on.
No, they didn't.
Yeah, they did. They built a biodome in Iowa.
Not with your Social Security money.
Yeah, they have. I'm sorry, the paper that's still left in the Social Security bank accounts that says IOU.
Those are called Treasury bills.
They actually use
George W. Bush was born with $1 million in Treasury bills in his trust fund. Are you saying that he didn't actually have $1 million? Serious question.
No,
Treasury bills are the safest investment in the world. That's what our Social Security is invested in.
The government, well, this is George W. Bush. They took their money voluntarily and put it in there.
That we should have Social Security, not that we shouldn't.
No, I actually think that where I will go with you is that privatizing Social Security is not the right way to go. The government shouldn't take it from us and then invest in the open market. But the solution is not the government taking our money and then spending it at their will. The solution is the government to stop taking our money.
If you can't make enough money through the course of your lifetime to save enough money that you can retire, tough luck, die in the gutter.
Actually, I would be happy to support any charity that was taking care of old people that had not saved enough.
All of the charitable giving in the United States to poor people, last year was around $5 billion. That's less than we spent on food stamps.
That is also less than what's taken away from us in
charity is not even
taxes.
Close.
All you have to do is take away the taxes. Stop taxing me on these things and I have money.
David, okay, apropos of that, David Koch says, we support repeal of all laws which impede the ability of any person to find employment, such as minimum wage laws. So you want to be, they also oppose, we advocate the complete separation of education and state. Government schools lead to the indoctrination of children and interfere with free choice. Government ownership, operation, regulation, and subsidy of schools and colleges should be ended. So we're all going to Trump University? No regulation?
Actually, most of the teachers' unions would call for this too, right? They say No Child Left Behind is a bad law. And in No Child Left Behind,
only because of the testing requirements. It took a testing industry.
I'm sorry, they don't want to be held accountable from federal government.
To do with that.
They
don't want to pay private companies owned by Neil Bush.
The federal government was spending like 7% of their money on the federal government. But the minimum wage laws are actually like death rate laws, right? Because by the time they pass them into law and start implementing them, it's already below the poverty level. If you do away with the minimum wage, you actually can have markets take over. And how many states now have higher than the federal minimum wage as their minimum wage laws? We should do away with the federal minimum wage.
Most of the blue states.
Most markets would come above the federal minimum wage very quickly.
So when
you don't need a law to tell somebody
when
what they
raised their minimum wage, and it goosed their economy, because suddenly now minimum wage employees who spend virtually 100% of their paycheck are getting more money, and so they're spending more money, which is stimulating aggregate demand. You think that's a bad thing?
What I'm saying is that the federal government shouldn't say what they can do. On a state level, I actually do think it's a bad idea, but I think that that's for a state-by-state decision.
Okay,
on the federal level, it's
David
horrible.
Koch ran on the platform of, we support the abolition of the Environmental Protection Agency. The EPA was started because the Cuyahoga River caught on fire. You want to go back to that?
Didn't the EPA just almost catch another river on fire by themselves here just a few months ago?
You're talking, this is last year, you're talking the private contractor that they hired to clean up a gold mine that had been dumped on we the people by a private for-profit
too busy.
corporation.
They can't even do their own job. Now they're hiring it out. This is, you can't blame the job.
So you want to do away with the EPA?
I mean, I think that that's fairly easy one.
Okay, we support abolition of the Department of Energy. The Department of Energy runs our nuclear programs, our nuclear weapons.
The Department of Energy almost doesn't do anything. The Department of Energy is overseeing where the Department of Energy does do things, like overseeing some of our trash lots. The left tends to oppose them doing that. A lot of the left wants to do away with
Koch says we specifically oppose laws requiring an individual to buy or use so-called self-protection equipment such as seat belts, airbags, and crash helmets. So, I mean, one of the things that we know from the safety belt laws is that because Reagan passed this law in '86 that said anybody who shows up at an ER has to be treated, that it was actually costing us more than the cost of the safety belts to treat the people who were injured in the car crashes. So it worked out to be economically a good thing to have seatbelt laws. You're saying do away with them? I'm
saying that implementing them meant that there was a certain amount of people that couldn't afford the cars because of adding them in. Could they not? Was it more dangerous?
Couldn't afford the car because it's an extra, $100 for a seatbelt.
It's actually more than that. Airbags were the same because the prices went up. The market works now, and that's part of the pricing system. But the fact is every time you raise the minimum wage, you make it faster for them to put somebody else in. Every time you increase regulation, you make it more expensive for a customer to buy something, and that's keeping the single mom that's trying to make ends meet.
Regulations are also consumer protection. So every time you do away with the regulation, you're doing away with the consumer protection, which is that mom. He's being protected.
I think that this is the good argument to have, right? This is where is the consumer protection and keeping the single mom away from earning for her family correct? I'm always going to side with the single mom providing for her family, but I'll let the left play nanny state all that they want. I'll take that argument every single day.
Okay, Charles, you get the last word.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Charles Sauer, economist and president of the Market Institute, marketinstitute.org. You can tweet him at Charles Sauer, S-A-U-E-R. Thank you, Charles.
Thank you.
We'll be back. And welcome back. Let me get back to my call screen software here and find my mouse. Bob, watching Free Speech TV in Farmington, Missouri. Hey, Bob, on Dish Network, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. When Jeff Sessions dropped all the civil rights lawsuits against all the cops that have murdered people on camera, he essentially told the cops they could kill anyone they wanted whenever they wanted, and they'd walk away with it.
Bob, I must have missed something big. When did that happen?
Oh, it happened a few days back.
Wow. How did I miss that? Are you sure? I mean, I know that he's said it, he's dropped the Justice Department challenge to Texas's voter suppression laws, but all the civil rights lawsuits against all the police who've killed people of color have been dropped?
This is what I heard. I would be very happy to find out that I was wrong.
Yeah, let me fact check that. But let's assume that if either it's happened or it may happen. What was your question in that context?
Well, that's essentially telling the cops they can shoot or torture anyone they want.
I agree.
How can we stop this?
Stop voting for Republicans.
I haven't for a long time.
We need. If the same number of people who showed up to vote in the last Obama election had showed up to vote in the last election, we would have, at the very least, a democratically controlled Senate and White House. And we would be looking at a Supreme Court nominee who was not a right-wing crank, but instead was, probably a progressive. So, elections have consequences, tragically, and I think people are figuring this out. Bob, I got to move along, but thanks. I'll dig into this and see if what you heard was correct. I would think that I would have heard about it also. But Richard in Warrington, Pennsylvania. Hey, Richard, what's on your mind?
Hey, Tom, thanks for taking the call. You rock with these right-wingers here. Listen, I wanted to give you a heads up on a person that's running to take over Jason Chaffetz's seat in the 3rd Congressional District in Utah. Her name's Dr. Kathy Allen, A-L-L-E-N, and I'm wondering if you guys can reach out to her or check her out. She's doing a crowd pack fund me, and went from about $32,000 last night at 6 o'clock to about $70,000. There seems to be a lot of grassroots effort on that. So if you read her bio, if it's all true, she seems like the real deal. I mean, community-type person, first job out of college 30, 40 years ago, congressional aide. She just seems like the real deal. So it's Kathy, Kathie, Allen, Allen, and she is in the Utah area. So that's what I wanted to talk to you about today. Tom.
We'll have to check it out. It's she's basically a Bernie-crat. Is that what you're saying, Richard?
Yeah, she is, and she's just. I think she was thinking about running for Congress, but after Jason Chavitz's rant yesterday on the iPhone, she said, "Hey, I'm going to run," and she just put together this crowd pack. And like I say, she's going from $32,000 to almost $70,000 in the last 20 hours as far as crowd pack funding if she decides to run. So her handle's at Catherine Allen, MD. For medical doctor, right. So check it out if you will, please.
Yeah, well, we'll put her on the air once she makes a formal announcement and she's got a campaign and she's through the primary. But it's good to know about. Richard, thanks for the call and thanks for the heads up. Fascinating. I have a feeling that a lot of Bernie-crats, a lot of genuine Democrats are going to be coming out and running for political office in 2018, and I suspect they're going to take down a lot of these phony baloney Republicans. We'll be back.
This year's election results have generated fear, sadness, and despair.
In the days and months ahead,
our democracy may face a crisis of historic proportions. But there is good news.
There is good news.
There is good news. Thousands of people are stepping forward in solidarity, resistance,
and resolve.
We join them.
We join them.
We join them.
In standing with the most vulnerable communities among us.
Those most likely to be targeted by new restrictions and policies.
We will tell their stories here.
Here
on Free Speech TV.
We will lift their voices here
on Free Speech TV.
In the difficult times ahead, know that we will be with you 24 hours a day.
Every day.
You are not alone. You are not alone.
You are not alone.
There are millions of us.
Raising our voices and hearts together as one.
We've got your back.
We got your back.
Free Speech TV's got your back.
The revolution is in progress.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And Lisa in Seattle. Hey, Lisa, you wanted to talk about National Women's Day? Lisa? Oh, Lisa. Okay, I'm going to put Lisa on hold because I think I've only got 30 seconds anyway. Okay, so Lisa, we'll give you a little more time when we come back. But yes, it is National Women's Day, and also, a day without women. A lot of women not showing up for work today, which is interesting. I mean, we had the same thing with immigrants, 2 weeks ago, I think it was, thereabouts, and something very similar, a day without immigrants, and the little Ethiopian cafe downstairs, which are immigrant women. I remember going in there and getting breakfast that day, and they were like, well, we thought about closing, but we really can't afford it. Today, they're closed. So I guess, Women's Day finally got to them, or got, it's a great little store. Anyhow, we'll be back with your calls and more of the news of the day right after this. Stick around. It's coming up on 28 minutes past the hour.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Back with your calls right after this. Welcome back to Thom Hartmann University Book Club. We're reading today from Screwed, The Undeclared War Against the Middle Class and What We Can Do About It. This is from Chapter 3, The Rise of the Corporatocracy, and it's in the middle of the chapter. It's the subchapter or subhead is Feudalist Takeover. America was not conceived of as a feudal state, F-E-U-D-A-L, feudalism being broadly defined as rule by the super rich.
Our nation was created in large part in reaction against centuries of European feudalism. As Ralph Waldo Emerson said in his lecture titled The Fortune of the Republic, delivered on December 1st, 1863, quote, "We began with freedom. America was opened after the feudal mischief was spent. No inquisitions here, no kings, no nobles, no dominant church," end quote. The founding idea of America was that our country would not be ruled by a handful of very powerful rich men. America was founded as a country ruled by we the people. And for democracy to work, there had to be a strong and broad middle class. Even at our country's founding, there were some who couldn't quite shake the idea that aristocracy was the way to go. As Jefferson warned in a letter in 1826 to William B. Giles, there are even those who, quote, "look to a single and splendid government of an aristocracy founded on banking institutions and moneyed corporations under the guise and cloak of their favorite branches of manufactures, commerce, and navigation, riding and ruling over the plundered plowmen and beggared yeomanry, farmers and factory workers. This will be to them the next blessing of the monarchy, of their first aim and perhaps the surest stepping stone to it." The aristocracy that Jefferson feared rose first during the Gilded Age in the 1880s, when just a few companies seized control of much of America, including many of our elected officials. The major form of transportation and communication in those days was the railroads, and the railroads were owned by the Vanderbilts. The major form of energy then, as today, was oil, monopolized by John D. Rockefeller's Standard Oil Trust. And the major form of trade was in manufactured goods, which required factories, which in turn required steel, monopolized by Andrew Carnegie and his Carnegie Steel Company. These monopolists required ways to retain their hold on the money, so they turned to financiers like Jay Gould and John Pierpont Morgan, who set up large trusts for them. The Progressive Movement and then FDR beat back these monopolists with the Sherman Antitrust Act, the National Labor Relations Act, the Wagner Act, and other laws that regulated the game of business. Then Ronald Reagan, George Bush Sr., Bill Clinton, and George Bush Jr. came along and turned back the clock. Reagan fought the labor laws. Bush Sr. pushed for fast-track trade authority for the president. Clinton finally took down trade protections with NAFTA. And Bush Jr. put corporate executives into the driver's seat on government legislation. We've entered a new robber baron era. Today, the major form of communication is by phone and the internet in an area increasingly monopolized by the new AT&T, formerly SBC singular AT&T. The major form of energy, oil, is controlled by just a handful of companies. Today's economic driver is the computer. Its software is monopolized by Microsoft, and its hardware is manufactured by a handful of oligarchs. Today, as in the Gilded Age, the rich are richer than ever. Forbes crows that in 2005, the rich got richer as the collective net worth of the United States' wealthiest climbed $125 billion to $1.13 trillion. That's greater than the gross domestic product of Spain or Canada. Bill Gates alone is worth $51 billion. 5 Walton family members, the owners of Walmart, made it into the top 10. Meanwhile, median household income fell for the 5th year in a row. In 1972, the median income for a person with a high school diploma was the equivalent of $42,600 in today's dollars. In 2002, the last year for which the National Center for Education Statistics compiled such numbers, a person with a high school diploma has a median income of $29,600. As the rich got richer, the rest of us got poorer, particularly what used to be of our middle class. The hallmark of the corporatocracy is monopoly. Fewer people holding more of the wealth, fewer companies holding more of the commons. The very competition that the conservatives claim to embrace is destroyed by the unrestrained growth of corporate interests. Big fish eat little fish over and over until there are no little fish left. And they eat the middle-sized fish until they're gone too. Look at the thoroughfares of any American city and ask yourself how many of the businesses here are locally owned. Instead of cash circulating within the local economy, at midnight, every night a button is pushed and the local money from all over America is vacuumed away to Little Rock or Chicago or New York. And the corporate lords want more. Not content with their hold over the private sector, they want to take over the public sector too. When Jeb Bush was governor of Florida and cut a deal with Enron to privatize the Everglades, it diminished the power of the Florida government to protect a natural resource and enhanced the power and profitability of Enron. Similarly, when politicians argue for harsher sentencing guidelines and also advocate more corporate-owned prisons,
They're enhancing the power and profits of one of America's fastest growing and most profitable remaining domestic industries, privately owned prisons. The cons look at the government's pollution controls and see regulations that get in the way of their profits. They look at single-payer health care and see a threat to the pharmaceuticals industry's practice of price gouging. They look at Social Security and see an opportunity for more bonuses for Wall Street fat cats. And on it goes. The book is Screwed.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. All the important stories we cover and the issues we care about are at hartmanreport.com. Members of our community can comment and join the conversation.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And Lisa in Seattle. Hey, Lisa, what's on your mind today?
Oh, how are you? I wanted to comment on the women's, movement that we're having today, and think that it should be celebrated and applauded, not in a negative way, but just to celebrate women and how integral we are to the entire world. You know, I think of women as the nurturers of the world. I think if women were in charge, we wouldn't be destroying the oceans and destroying things like we are. And think about it. Most of the attacks from the Trump administration and others is against women, okay? Medical care. Who needs medical care more than a woman? Okay, when you are having a baby, who needs medical care more than that from the time you conceive to the birth? Who needs medical care more than children? And who takes their children to the doctor or even go to the doctor more than women? I know I have to get an act of Congress to get most of the males in my life to go. That's brothers, husbands, sons, to go to the doctor most of the time. Unless something's falling off, they're not going. And think about how women are so disrespected, and even our president, which I think women all over the world are enraged that this type of person could be one of the most powerful men in the world. And just the fact that, don't look at it now. Yeah, women are probably upset because we have borne the brunt of the abuse in the world. I think about my mother, in the 30s and the 40s. She had no voice. She was the typical woman of color, poverty, unfortunately, a terrible stepfather that was a predator, married, had 14 children, struggled, worked, was a farmer, always wanted to be a businesswoman, managed and loved her children well. She never let the world turn her against her children where she became an abuser. She was the nicest, sweetest mother. And all I'm saying is now, in my generation, we had a voice. And even the younger women now have a voice. We need to use it to make a difference for all women. And then women of color even bear more of the abuse and problems. Think of the women in the Middle East now being taken and torn from their homes, children killed. All of these things happening, it's impacting women. Then that impacts the children. That impacts the world. So I applaud the women that are standing up today and speaking out. And it's time for the world to give women a chance and put them where they're supposed to be, which is a place of honor. A woman brought all of us into this world. Yep. And I bet you $10,000 that if your mother had left you, just had you, walked off and left you, I don't know if you would even be here today.
Oh, I'm sure it wouldn't be. And
most people, because if it was up to my father, he would have took care of us, but I bet we wouldn't have had the sweet, loving, kind life we had. You know what I'm saying?
I do.
So how are we going to take the foundations of the earth and disrespect them, abuse them, deny them? Those aren't my babies. It's so easy for a man to say, oh, I don't have to be responsible sexually. I can do anything with any woman, anywhere. And you're not worried about unintended births. You're not worried about STDs, even the AIDS epidemic, and STDs affect us more. It is time people open their eyes and say, not only are we destroying the earth, we're destroying women, and by the end result, we're destroying men. We're destroying the entire foundations of the world. And I'm not saying men don't have their issues. I applaud the men that are stepping up and being fathers and being nurturers now, and not afraid to say, hey, I'll go home and cook and change a diaper. I'll cook a meal. I know times you ask a man to change a diaper and cook a meal, you will get beat.
Yeah.
Beat up.
Lisa, I have to move along, but it was an absolutely brilliant rant, and you know, I agree with everything you said, and I would note that, you know, of the 5 Iroquois nations, and Franklin brought some Iroquois elders to the Constitutional Convention. 4 of those 5 nations did not allow men to vote, and because it was essentially written into the Iroquois Constitution that all decisions had to be made in the context of their impact on 7 generations down in the future. And the consensus was that, you know, men were not thinking like that, women were. And I think that was absolutely accurate. And I think the world would be a much different and arguably a much better place if we had been following, you know, I mean, Franklin and all those guys, they all knew that only women could vote in these 4 out of these 5 Iroquois nations. And they just thought, oh, well, they just got the wrong gender wrong. Let's just only have one gender vote. And but let's make it men instead of women, and it was a terrible mistake. And it's, you know, at least to have equal franchise at that time. And I think that, you know, had men been disenfranchised, it would be fascinating to see how different the world would be. I personally think testosterone is the most destructive drug on earth. And so anyhow, Lisa, thank you for the call. Thank you for the rant. Bill in St. Helens, Oregon. Hey, Bill, what's on your mind today?
Yeah, hi, Tom. One quick aside to your last guest. It's the single mom's not being hurt by overregulation. She's being hurt by part-time jobs, low wages, no benefits, by corporations that refuse to share their wealth with its original source. And by the way, I'd love your guest to tell me exactly how often a corporation has shared the savings with its consumers of deregulation. Never. Okay, not my topic. My topic, I totally agree with your sharing, starving the beast, but the Republicans continue to say, Tom, I'm just a little older than you. The Republicans continue to say that this is to create jobs, trickle down, create jobs, increase wealth of the middle class, blah, blah. Well, guess what? I've just been looking on Wikipedia. We've been cutting taxes on corporations and the wealthy on and off, but pretty steadily since the 80s, okay? And what I'm seeing at almost 67, what I'm seeing is a sea with ever fewer and ever more lavish yachts surrounded by ever increasing number of lifeboats. So if this is such a good deal and if this works so well, then why hasn't it worked?
Right. We're back to levels of...
Tom, they've had 35 years. I mean, 40, you know.
Yeah, and by the way, this is the second time in the lifetime of people still alive that we have seen this cycle repeat itself. In 1920, when Warren Harding was elected, the top tax rate was 91%, and there was fairly reasonable regulation on business, largely as a result of the great crash of 1897. Warren Harding did away with the regulations on Wall Street and the banks and dropped that top tax rate to 25%. And what did we see? Over the next 8 years, we saw the rich get incredibly, 9 years, rich get incredibly richer, and the poor actually got poorer. And that was referred to as, you know, the Roaring '20s. And they came to a screaming halt and a crash in 1929. And frankly, I think that we're seeing the exact same thing right now. And we are at levels of wealth inequality that are virtually identical to those in 1928, 29. And that's a setup for a disaster. So very well said, Bill. I'm totally with you and spot on. Maine in Chicago. Hey, Maine, what's on your mind today?
Yeah, how you doing, Tom?
Good.
I wanted to talk about, being a black man. I'm going to be on the suppression of the vote. Mm-hmm. And one of those is the Electoral College itself. I mean, it suppresses the white vote. When you look at it, we've had voter suppression since the Electoral College came into existence.
You're right.
And another thing, I heard that now the Republican Party is trying to do this 70-30 thing, where 70% of the people, they want to work and do all and be good, abiding citizens, and 30% just want to be what would you call hang-ons, people who just want handouts and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But yet they want to talk about entitlements Well, what is it when you give the top 400 families $7 million tax-free or with no strings attached or anything like that? Isn't that entitled? Don't they feel like that's an entitlement?
Yep. Yeah, it's well said, Maine. The Republicans' only interest is big corporations and billionaires, and multimillionaires too. And the Democratic Party has been, struggling to represent the interests of actual working people and Americans across this country for quite some time. And the media has been giving them short shrift. And, not to mention the political process. And then you've got these billionaires buying all these state races. Maine, thanks a lot for the call. Well said.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
We'll be back. Talk Media News is going to check in, give us an update on the news of the day, and we'll be taking your calls. And welcome back. By the way, I looked up, in fact, Troy and I both looked up, and somebody tweeted it at me about the whole question, and it's also in our chat room, the whole question of whether Jeff Sessions has dropped the civil rights charges against the police officers. And as far as I can tell, all he has essentially has done is said that he's inclined not to continue the order under which the Chicago Police Department has to stop engaging in a pattern of civil rights abuses. But with regard to any of the other federal, now it won't surprise me at all if he does stop enforcing these laws. After all, it's Jefferson Beauregard Sessions III. He's the guy who said he kind of liked the Ku Klux Klan until he discovered some of them smoked pot. It's like this. What do you expect? But anyway, Bob in Sacramento. Hey, Bob, what's on your mind? Thanks for watching Free Speech TV.
Hi, Tom. Geez, I don't want to pick on Sauer by name, just like I didn't want to pick on McCabe by name yesterday. But you've had me listen to them now 2 days in a row.
Yeah.
And
I think it's important that Americans. You can tune on any.
I understand your reasoning for putting them on. I really do understand your reasoning for putting them on. But if you're going to put them on, make them answer your questions. The question of how does cutting taxes help the person that is on minimum wage and pays no income tax?
Right. Bob, when they don't answer the question, that's an answer. And everybody gets it. This is my point. I watch MSNBC, CNN, Fox, whatever it may be, and right-wingers come on and they make these points that, we're going to create prosperity, we're going to do this, that, and the other thing, and nobody pushes back. And so, I'm the guy pushing back, and I'm pleased to do it, and I'm going to continue doing it because people need to know how to talk back to these crazies. Not to say that Charles is a crazy, but, in general. Karen in Sandstone, Minnesota. Hey, Karen, what's on your mind? Thanks for watching Free Speech on DirecTV.
Hi, Tom. Are you there?
I am.
Oh, okay. Hi. I just wanted to say a couple things. First of all, he's not draining the swamp, so we better flush the toilet,
Yeah.
And
which we have to do in November of 2018.
Yep, exactly. The sooner the better. Mostly I was wondering, what is the definition of treason? And why isn't anybody asking that? And if they are involved in treason, don't we get to attach their assets?
Yeah, I think the most rigorous definition of treason is that it's giving aid and comfort to an enemy during time of war. And I'm not sure that you could demonstrate that any of these guys are committing, quote, treason. But sedition, attacking your own country is a possibility, or moral treason. It's even just to say, we don't even believe in the general welfare clause of the Constitution. To hell with the general welfare of the people. That's, whether it's treasonous or seditious or just bad politics or un-American, I guess would be the thing that I would say. But I think we have to be careful about, using, very precise language with these people. But Karen, your point is well taken. Thank you for the call, and thanks for watching Free Speech TV. We'll be right back. Ellen Ratner will be with us with the news of the day right after this. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Let's check in with Talk Media News and find out what's going on in the world today. This report brought to you by goatsfortheoldgoat.com, Ellen Ratner's charity that does extraordinary work in South Sudan, which is right now racked by war and famine. Ellen, welcome to the program.
Well, thank you so much. First of all, let's talk about Speaker Paul Ryan. Although he said this yesterday, he tried to downplay suggestions that more conservative members of Congress may actually try and prevent passage of the Obamacare replacement bill. He said we're going through inevitable growing pains of being an opposition party to becoming a governing party. So that is what he said. Now, what's very interesting is the Congressional Budget Office, which scores any legislation, in other words, scoring means how much it's going to cost, has not come up with their figures yet. So we have no idea what this is going to cost. Right.
I'm wondering what you think of this, Ellen. My political instincts here. It seems to me that if I was running the Republican Party, the way that I would do this is I would pass a full repeal of Obamacare right now that doesn't take effect for either 1 or 2 years. And then I would turn to the Democrats and say, okay, it's a done deal. The president signed it. Now we're going to put together something to provide health care to people. Do you guys, Democrats, do you want to play in this game or not? And that way, anything that gets created, the Democrats will get blamed for. And any deficiencies that are associated with it, the Democrats will get blamed for. What do you think?
But, Tom, you're a sensible human being.
Yeah. Well, this is super Machiavellian, it's anyhow.
Well, what's very interesting is that I used to work in mental health, and I'm still very close to people in Massachusetts where they are dealing with mental health, and I was up there this weekend. And basically, the American Health Care Act, as you know, there's a summary, but there's a release from the Association of Behavioral Health Care. And what they're saying is that the current legislation refinances Medicare into a per capita basis. And what's going to happen is that is going to destroy both health care and opioid addiction treatment because of the cap on this.
So more people will be dying of overdoses.
More people will be dying of overdoses. Now, believe it or not, when I was in Massachusetts this weekend, there is an amazing program at the Gloucester Department of Police Department where you can walk into the Gloucester Police Department 24 hours a day. It's better than an emergency room. You can have drugs on you. You don't have to have drugs on you. And they will get you into treatment 24 hours a day. They have reduced the recidivism rate from 80% to 30%. They've reduced the number of crimes by at least 30%, and they said the policemen are so popular in their town, the people in the town are coming up and giving them hugs.
So this is the police department in Gloucester, Mass. has decided to treat drug addiction as a medical issue rather than a criminal issue. That's brilliant.
That's right. And they say, and actually this is also the Arlington police chief, Arlington, Massachusetts, said, we cannot arrest ourselves out of this problem.
Yeah.
It is a problem. It is a public health problem.
Yeah, it's just like Stanley McChrystal saying, I think you were with me, it was at a talkers convention back 8 or 9 years ago, that we can't kill our way out of the war in Afghanistan. The same thing. I mean,
exactly.
That blunt instrument.
Some other interesting things. Again, this happened yesterday, but it's making its rounds today. Senator Al Franken, who we all know, had basically said that he thinks that Jeff Sessions did not tell the truth, and he wants him to go back before the committee. That's probably not going to happen, but it makes good copy.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, St. Patrick's Day, going back up to Boston again, the mayor said, Mayor Marty Walsh said that he is not going to march in the 17th of March's St. Patrick's Day parade unless organizers reverse their rejection of a gay veterans group. The gay veterans group has marched 2 years in a row. This year they were not invited.
Oh, that's unfortunate.
Yes, and the mayor is just saying we're an open city, we're open to everybody, and that's the way it's going to be. And he will not march in the parade, and of course they want the mayor.
Good on him. Okay.
Now, WikiLeaks, and as I think I've said to you many times before, my brother, before he passed, was Julian Assange's attorney. My former sister-in-law, who was married to my brother originally, and they're still close friends, is now Julian Assange's attorney. But this is a question that actually came from a Washington Post story just a few minutes ago. And it said that tucked into the WikiLeaks analysis of all the documents was the fact that they noticed that the CIA has an embedded devices branch, which includes vehicle systems. And basically what can happen in the vehicle systems branch is that they can direct a car to essentially get into a car accident and perhaps kill the person.
Whoa. And in addition to that, they can turn on the microphone in the car and listen to anything in the car, right?
Absolutely, that can happen.
Yeah, that's just like the TVs.
That's exactly right. So they said that your car can be hacked and made to crash.
Wow. That's amazing. You just covered up your camera lens.
Oh, I did.
Yeah,
there I am.
there you go.
Okay. All right. Now, the Human Rights Campaign, which is the nation's largest gay, bisexual, transgender organization, they have just submitted a Freedom of Information Act to both the Department of Justice and Department of Education. They are trying to get what's going on with the Trump administration, which, as you know, reiterated what happens in Title IX, which is why the Supreme Court pulled out under their direction, and what's going to happen to transgender students. They want to know who made this decision, how the decision was made. So that is also happening. Interesting.
Was that the Department of Ed?
The Department of Ed actually met today with Betsy DeVos, met with people from GLSEN, which is the Gay Lesbian Teachers Association. And the Gay Lesbian Teachers Association also said to Betsy DeVos what they're concerned with transgender students. Now, as you know, Betsy DeVos, as opposed to members of her family that have given to all this anti-gay, reparative therapy stuff, Betsy DeVos said that was her members of her family and was not her.
Right.
And that she met with these people from GLSEN is actually, I think, a very positive.
Yeah, she's tolerant of this. In fact, she opposed the pulling back the transgender bathroom rights thing that I guess Sessions did.
Right. Yeah. And so she is very open to this. But as you know, she gets overruled in the administration on a regular basis, it looks like, particularly on this issue.
Yeah.
And, of course, there was supposed to be a transgender march on the day that the Supreme Court was going to hear this, either March 27th or 28th, but that is not going to happen at this point. It may happen, but it obviously
because SCOTUS kicked it back to the lower court.
That's right. They kicked it back to a lower court that did not agree with them giving transgender people the bathroom of their choice.
Right.
I can't, this is, it's quite unbelievable. By the way, the White House just put out, just a few minutes ago, something saying they are going to do the Easter egg roll. Now, that may not be a big piece of news, except that we had heard that they had not planned for these.
Is Sean Spicer going to wear his bunny costume?
I have no idea, but I think that's the funniest thing I've ever heard, and somebody ought to ask it.
Yeah, it's hysterical looking at all those old pictures of Sean Spicer with George W. Bush in a bunny costume. Anyhow, Ellen Ratner, thank you, Ellen.
Thank you.
TalkMediaNews.com. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
Here with your world in 2 minutes, I'm your
The Thom Hartmann program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the organic wine company, ecowine.com.
The Thom Hartmann program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit freespeechbeets.com. And welcome back to Thom Hartmann University, the Thom Hartmann Book Club. Today we're reading from Attention Deficit Disorder, A Different Perception. I think it's the only book that I've written that Time Magazine has done a story on. This is, we're in chapter 14. Throughout the book, I explain the whole idea of hunters and farmers, that ADD characteristics are something that would help in a hunting-gathering society. They become a liability in an agricultural society. And so this chapter is titled The Edison Trait, Hunters Who Have Changed the World. Hunters sometimes have difficulty answering the question, what do you do for a living? It's not that there isn't an answer, there are too many answers. Hunters of above average or even genius intelligence often have resumes that are startling in their diversity and accomplishment, even though they may have struggled to simply finish high school. Similarly, the stereotype of the eccentric genius or loony creative type is often applied to hunter inventors, artists, writers, and designers. At many ad agencies, the creative types are allowed or even encouraged to have an eccentric appearance with flowered shirts, long hair, jeans, etc. As the chapter on ADD and creativity pointed out, the ability to think innovatively is intrinsically tied to the ability to fall into an open and therefore distractible state of consciousness, one of the characteristics of ADHD. Conversely, to make use of the inspirations gained from such typical hunter-free association, there must be a compensating burst of focused energy in order to bring these concepts into reality. Learning to channel these bursts is the challenge to every hunter. When hunters fail in life, it is often because their self-image was distorted in an early age when they were labeled as a problem. Their assets are also neglected if they plug into a job or a segment of society which requires farmer rather than hunter skills. But let's look at some successful hunters in history who have demonstrated tremendous powers of transformation, vitality, and dynamic energy, and whose biographies appear to conform to the American Psychiatric Association's DSM criteria of ADHD. While it's impossible for us to reach back to historic figures and ask them to answer the questions which might lead to a medically supportable diagnosis of ADHD, their life stories very often give us those answers in a rather overt fashion. Consider the following. The life of Thomas Alva Edison has been an inspiration to hunter boys for nearly a century. Born in the Midwest before the Civil War, Edison wrote, quote, I remember I used never to be able to get along at school. I was always at the foot of the class. I used to feel that the teachers did not sympathize with me and that my father thought I was stupid. Edison complained about the distractions of the other children in his school and the fact that learning was abstract and not real. To be able to actually do something, to test a theory or discover a fact through experience, he wrote in his diary, quote, for one instant was better than learning about something he had never seen for 2 hours, end quote. Believing her son had potential, Edison's mother took over his schooling. Instead of requiring her son to learn a particular curriculum by rote, she instead encouraged him to explore things he found interesting. He soon became a voracious reader and consumed a huge body of knowledge in a wide variety of subjects. Edison left home at the age of 12 and started a long procession of short-lived jobs. The year he was 17, he held 4 different jobs, being fired from each one because of his inattentiveness to the duties or routine of the job. When he was 15, he had a job as a railroad signalman during the night and had to clock in via telegraph every hour. He was fired when his superiors learned that his punctual check-in signal was actually transmitted by a simple invention he'd created from an alarm clock, which would send the Morse code signal on the hour. That invention led to his developing the first automatic telegraph and then the first stock ticker, although he held a dozen more jobs before he received $40,000 for his stock ticker at age 21 and was able to use that money to establish a laboratory where he could devote himself to inventing. Being a classic hunter, Edison usually worked on many projects at the same time. In the year of 1877, for example, We now know that he had more than 40 inventions in process in his laboratory concurrently. He kept his own hours, often working through the night. When he became bored or saturated with one invention, he would quickly hop to another. Edison credited his inability to stick to one task for a long time as being the power of his creative efforts. He wrote, quote, he said, quote, look, I start here with the intention of going there, drawing an imaginary line, in an experiment, say, to increase the speed of the Atlantic cable. But when I've arrived part of the way in my straight line, I meet with a phenomena, and it leads me off in another direction to something totally unexpected, end of quote. Thomas Edison transformed the 20th century with his invention of the electric light bulb, the central power generating station, the phonograph, the flexible celluloid film and movie projector, the alkaline storage battery, and the microphone, merely a few of the more than 1,000 major patents he registered before his death in 1931. Benjamin Franklin flunked out of George Brownell's academy after only 2 years of formal education. It was said that he was slow at doing sums, math, and he utterly failed in arithmetic. His teacher complained that he would never pay attention to his lessons. He spent 2 years as an apprentice candlemaker to his father, but his father's frustrations with young Ben were legion. The boy was always slipping off to explore the town, the salt marshes, and the incoming ships. Having demonstrated his hunter inability to be a scholar in the formal farmer schools of the day, Franklin went on to become one of the most well-educated in terms of practical abilities men in American history. Although he couldn't stick with a single job, Franklin is now celebrated for his accomplishments in dozens of roles. He was a printer, moralist, civic leader, essayist, inventor, scientist, diplomat, publisher, statesman, postmaster, candlemaker, mechanic, and philosopher, among others. His impulsive streak, which was partially responsible for the creation of the United States of America, showed itself early when, at the age of 16, he wrote several articles for the Courant, a Boston newspaper making fun of Boston's authorities and society figures. Anyhow, the book is Attention Deficit Disorder, A Different Perception.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Hey, welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And in the studio with me, Alberto Saldamando, a human rights lawyer working with the Indigenous Environmental Network. That's IENEarth.org. And if you want to get a lot of good information about what is going on with the movement in general, you can go to Facebook and plug in Indigenous Rising Media, and that will come up. Do I have that right? Alberto, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much for joining us. So I'm guessing probably a lot of people don't even realize that there are teepees right now down by the Washington Monument on the National Mall. What's going on?
Well, there was it's really an extension of the Standing Rock Defense of Water. Happened in North Dakota starting last summer, really big time. It really began in February of last year, but through the fall and winter, the early winter, thousands and thousands of people. I mean, at one point it was 12,000 people were camping out trying to block a pipeline, an oil pipeline from going underneath the Missouri River. And so this is an extension of that. Our actions this week, we're having a march on Friday, gathering at the Army Corps of Engineers and marching to the White House. And then in the afternoon, there'll be another action. But it's all part of that movement. I think the importance of Standing Rock for many of us was that it was not just there. We had solidarity, strong solidarity from really the rest of the world, and particularly from Indians, from Native Americans throughout the United States and Alaska, Native Hawaiians, in addition to the Maori, and there was some Sarayaku from Ecuador. I mean, it was really an international. It was international. It's really tied into Berta Cáceres and her defense of her people. I mean, she was not an environmentalist, even though she got the Goldman Award. She was more defending the waters. She was defending the water against the hydroelectric dam in Honduras.
She was murdered 2 years ago, wasn't
it? Murdered. In fact, her anniversary was, I think, this week. And it was last year.
Oh, last year.
Yeah. I went on a delegation to visit her family and delegation of solidarity. They're still being assassinated down there. But it is, in fact, I think it was Noam Chomsky last year said that the indigenous peoples were the only people who were really defending the environment. And I think to a certain degree that's true. I think the there are certainly a lot of environmentalists, non-indigenous environmentalists. They greatly outnumber Indians, really. But I think indigenous peoples all over the world are laying their lives on the line for it, and I think that's the big difference. And so that's what we tried. We tried to defend the water, and we're really getting close to success when the administration changed. And,
well, and that you never know. I mean, sometimes the bad wakes people up, and I think for a lot of us, it's this whole Trump and Republican control of the government is just a splash of cold water in the face. And,
I think that's true. That's true. I personally believe he's reorganizing us. I think the difference is too now in terms of other resistance in the past is that it's coalescing a lot of different groups into a more solid block, and we have great affinity and great solidarity with Black Lives Matter, the Black movements, Black environmental justice movements as well, in addition to white groups, 360.org. So there is a coalition building. I think women also understand indigenous issues, and we certainly support the rights of women. Much of our leadership really is women. So there are these connections that we're trying to make too, not just in Standing Rock, but here in Washington and hopefully beyond, is to try and become a part of a larger movement, a larger liberation movement, if you want to call it that, or a larger civil rights movement.
And an environmental rights movement. Back 20, 30 years ago, I read Peter Farb's books, Man's Rise to Civilization. It was a collection of, as I recall, it was 34 different tribes, and it was about first contact. He went back and found the very first contact, and what did these societies look like, and how did they operate?
It's interesting.
And there's incredible diversity across North America. And it's a remarkable book. It's out of print now, but you can find, used copies and whatnot, because he died in the 60s. But one of the things that I got out of reading that book, and I don't, let me reality check this with you, was that many of these communities, many of these Native American communities around North America had engaged essentially when literally 10 or 20,000 years ago, when they were first occupying the territories, engaged in environmental destruction that bit them in the butt, basically. They wiped out the local environment and then realized, hey, we just wiped out the local environment. And that led to a way of viewing the earth as, people are part of it, that has become almost a cartoon representation of Native Americans as the keepers of the earth. And yet there's a real history there. At least there was, according to Farb. I'm curious your thoughts on that, and how that might inform people, and how our culture, and this largely Anglo culture, or this European white culture, corporate culture also, has lost contact with all of that.
Yeah. I think that's true. I think one of the again, going back to Standing Rock, it was a watershed in the sense, too, that traditional people got involved, as well as tribal governments. And normally those two different forms of leadership are at odds. But in Standing Rock, they somehow came together. And I think that there are some indigenous peoples, I think more and more, really, are discovering that the older cultures contained an ancient wisdom that is more valid today than it's ever been. There is that the wisdom, the spiritual practices, that all beings, all life is related. I think, from a scientific perspective, you can describe it in terms of biological diversity and loss, but it's true. We are all related, and if one species becomes extinct, it puts other species in danger of extinction themselves. And the interrelatedness of all the web of life. I think that a lot of non-indigenous peoples are understanding, though, that ancient wisdom. We practice it. It's practiced in ceremony. The Lakota call it the Buffalo Nation, and the Buffalo Man and the Buffalo Woman, and the Buffalo White Calf Child, or whatever, is part of perhaps a sense of existence. That you're right. There was it hopefully is coming back. I think a lot of non-indigenous peoples are beginning to recognize that web of life. They're beginning to recognize the defense of water. That water is living. Water is life. and that we can't go about just putting it in such dire jeopardy for oil spills. The oceans are another example of that connectedness with people. I mean, we came from the oceans in certain respects. A lot of Native American peoples believe, or a lot of indigenous peoples. I do a lot of international work, and I've gotten to know some creation stories from other cultures, and we came from the earth, and the earth is our mother. I mean, that's the truth.
Yeah, it is. I mean, that's the biological truth, and and on Earth we came out of the seas.
That's right.
So what can people who are people of goodwill, people who want to be allies to Native peoples here in the United States? I mentioned the Facebook page, Indigenous Rising Media, and of course IEN Earth, the Indigenous Environmental Network, earth.org, the website, and people can tweet at IEN Earth. But beyond just looking at a website, what can people do?
Well, I mean, from an individual's perspective, I think things like climate change are very individualistic kinds of things in certain respects. I think that really, although I do a lot of international work, I do it in support of frontline communities. And the truth is that politics is local. Mm-hmm. And I think that if they get involved, they may want to get involved in allies that we have, or like Friends of the Earth, or maybe Sierra Club even at this point, which is really an interesting phenomenon in the last several years.
Such
sort
a
of
main
alliances.
Yeah.
Well, it's always been, they take our agenda and then we got Indians give us money, but now we're really participating in with many of these people. So becoming parts of those, there's all kinds of support. But I think it's really there's a lot of opportunity locally. I mean, find out about the Indian tribes in your area. People don't know that there's Indians 40 miles away from here. The Piscatamis and the Delawares, and they're very traditional people. The Mohawks in New York, or even in New Jersey, they're having environmental problems. I think that they want to dam up their rivers. They want to develop, put up housing, and they are trying to resist those kinds of development. Really, that does not enhance in any way. It is a deterioration of their way of life. And so there are issues that they can get involved with. It's not something that obviously you can donate money. I mean, that's always good. We've done very well, really, in supporting Standing Rock and the encampment by those fundraising websites. We still need money for legal support for a lot of our people that were arrested and charged with ridiculous felonies. But you're dealing with a court in North Dakota. You're not dealing with a jury of your peers in any respect. But there are a great many things that people can do. It's living and really start looking at life not as a matter of diversions on television, but perhaps, and I'm not talking about some really deep analysis, but really just considering what the world is about, what life is about, what they value most.
Right.
And I think they would find that family and life and health and those things are pretty the most valuable, and perhaps they could stop.
Well said. Alberto Saldamando, human rights lawyer working with the Indigenous Environmental Network. Hang on just a second.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Over on Facebook, Indigenous Rising Media, and on the internet, IENEarth.org. Alberto, thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
Great having you with us.
Fun. Thank you.
And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And Diane in Livonia, Michigan. Hey, Diane, thanks for watching Free Speech TV. What's on your mind?
Hey,
it's okay. You can walk
right
right
real quick for you because I know you're always on a time plan. Yeah. We have 60-mile-an-hour winds here today, so I've lost my power twice, so it's great to be on hold.
I have noticed winds are just like whipping across this country. We changed planes in Denver the other day. It was 47-mile-an-hour gusts. We've been having wild winds here in D.C. I wonder if this has to do with the collapse of the ice in the Arctic.
We know it's all connected, but we can't talk about it because it's not in the Trump agenda. But anyway, I want to talk about this whole thing yesterday. It really got me going when you were talking to that Neil McCabe or Phil McCabe. I don't remember.
Yeah, Neil.
right before the our break, you had said, push back. And I thought to myself, I got to call. Because when I was listening, I thought, one of the things that came out that just blew me away was he said something, it's always, the Republicans always say the people want this. The people don't want this health care. The people hate Obamacare. The people don't hate Obamacare. Have you seen the town halls that the Republicans don't want to show up at? The old people in Iowa are standing up and saying, I couldn't buy this shirt without Obamacare. So I think I'm looking at it and saying, wait a minute. What are the polls saying? The polls say the people love the ACA. So now you want to say they keep repeating and repeating and repeating. The people asked us for this. No, they didn't. You told the people it was terrible, and they believed you. It's not terrible. I have it. Okay? And then I'm going to go through this real quick. I'm 54. When I was 38, I decided as a small business owner and a homeowner that I should get some insurance. I had to get a catastrophic plan because that was the only thing I could afford. It was close to $400 at 38. Well, healthy, active, not overweight, really good shape girl. Next year it goes up $100. The next year it goes up $100. I can't afford it. I drop it. I lived until I was close to 50 without insurance and got by.
Wow.
Now I'm in the ACA. Okay, they wanted to charge me, let me say, close to $600 for catastrophic when I was probably 42.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm in the ACA. I have pharmacy. I have vision. I have whatever, and it costs me $408 a month. Now it's a lot, and it's hard because I'm older and I don't work as hard as I used to. But I have so much more. So how dare you say that it's not worth it? I'm 54. Yeah. Something could happen. I could get a tumor. I could get cancer. I could get breast cancer. But
God forbid.
And mammograms. So anyway.
Yeah, I think it's a great rant, Diane, and you're absolutely right. And what the Republicans want to do is they want to bring back catastrophic coverage, which is basically no coverage at all. It means that if you get sick, you're definitely going to go bankrupt. 10 years ago in the United States.
I get sued if I was driving down the road and I had a work truck, I'm a gardener. That's all I am. It's just a little gardener, but my truck is my office. And
Yep. Yeah. And 10 years ago in the United States, half of all bankruptcies were because somebody got sick. And I don't know what that number is now, but I'll bet it's a lot lower.
They took away that law.
The ability to declare bankruptcy. Well, they took it away for at least people with student debt. Diane, thank you for the call, and thanks for watching Free Speech TV. We'll be right back.
This year's election results have generated fear, sadness, and despair.
In the days and months ahead,
our democracy may face a crisis of historic proportions. But there is good news.
There is good news.
There is good news. Thousands of people are stepping forward in solidarity, resistance,
and resolve.
We join them.
We join them.
We join them.
In standing with the most vulnerable communities among us.
Those most likely to be targeted by new restrictions and policies.
We will tell their stories here.
Here.
Here on Free Speech TV.
We will lift their voices here.
Here on Free Speech TV.
In the difficult times ahead, know that we will be with you 24 hours a day.
Every day.
You are not alone.
You are not alone.
You are not alone.
There are millions of us.
Raising our voices and hearts together as one.
We've got your back.
We got your back.
Free Speech TV's got your back.
The revolution is in progress.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you and Florence in Rainier, Washington. Hey, Florence, what's on your mind today?
Oh, hi there, Tom. You were talking about how important it is to work on the 2018 election, and I wanted everyone to know that there are a lot of positions available this year, positions for city council, school board, etc. It's so important to make those institutions progressive to oppose Republican rule. You can go to your local county auditor's website and find the list. There will be anything from dozens to hundreds of openings. You'll need to sign up in the next month or two if you want to run, and many positions won't even be contested, so you'll just be a shoo-in. And then look for support from your local progressive groups, Our Revolution, Local Progressive Democrats. They're all on Facebook.
Yeah, pdamerica.org.
Do what Bernie said. Get going.
Yep, I'm with you. And thanks for the pep talk. It's really, really good advice, and it's amazing. I mean, this is we had on this program a week or so ago the Larry Cohen, who is the CEO of Our Revolution, and he said out of the, as I recall, roughly 3,200 counties in the United States, in about 2,000 of those counties, basically the Democrats don't have a presence, or at least not a consequential presence. And you know, in virtually every single one of them, there will almost always be a race where there's no Democrat contesting the race. And that's just, you know, that's just a total failure of the Democratic Party that we need to fix by showing up and participating. Florence, you nailed it. Thank you for the call. Judy in Chicago. Hey, Judy, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. I was just wondering, this morning I saw that Andrea Mitchell was at a press conference with Rex Tillerson, and they escorted her out because she was asking him questions about Russia. And I wondered if you had seen or heard anything about that.
I didn't. That's pretty amazing. Andrea Mitchell being escorted out?
Yeah, she kept talking all the way out of the door, and these people just kept crowding around her and saying, well, thank you, but they escorted her out the door. And then she said, when she got out the door, you know, it's been 5 minutes, I'm still waiting and no answer. So there you go.
Whoa, that's incredible. Judy, thanks for the heads up. I'll have to look for the clip. Linda in Milladore, Wisconsin. Linda, we got about a minute to the break. You got a quick one?
Yes, Tom. Even the insurance companies go up, but the hospitals are going up.
Yep.
Prices are just outrageous. For a procedure I paid 6 months ago, $237, has now gone up to over $1,013.
Wow. Yeah, it's like the pigs are feeding at the trough.
Yeah, they are. It's ridiculous. And what we got to pay after insurance this time is $758 for a procedure that we could do at home, and which we were going to do.
Wow. So you're paying more now for a medical procedure than you're paying more out of pocket than the entire procedure cost just a year ago.
Yeah.
That's incredible. That's incredible. Yeah. I mean, this is what happens when you have for-profit hospitals, you have for-profit health care, you have for-profit health insurance companies, and everybody thinks, you know, oh, yeah, the CEO should make $20 million a year. Of course, that's what CEOs make. Oh, yeah, the senior executives, they should all make $1 million a year. That's what senior executives make. And, you know, and you end up with, you know, the hospitals charging you, you know, $20 for an aspirin. It's absolutely nuts. So, and
well, thank you, Tom.
Yeah, thank you, Linda. This is a strong argument for why we need to have single-payer health care in the United States. John Conyers, H.R. 676. It's a 3-page bill. And basically all it says is, maybe it's even a 1-page, but I'm pretty sure it's 3 pages. And basically all it says is that the eligibility age for Medicare is now 0. Yeah, you're eligible for Medicare the moment you're born. And, of course, your mom had it throughout the pregnancy. So you're continuously covered at every stage of life and even pre-life. And then, you know, we the people can start negotiating with these hospitals and doctors.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Back with more of your calls and the news of the day. Did you hear what happened? What Israel just did today? This is amazing. I'll tell you about it after the break. The other path is the study that American psychologist Bruce Alexander did, a study that he did at Simon Fraser University in British Columbia, in Vancouver, Canada. Vancouver, BC. This was in the 1970s. And I've talked about this in the past on this program, the study where, you know, this is your brain on drugs, right? Remember the Reagan drug war, Reagan amping up Nixon's drug war? And they had this study where these rats in these cages, if they were given water or water with cocaine or water with heroin, they would choose the drugged water and they would keep taking it and taking it and taking it until they died.
And that was like, therefore, we've got to go out and, like, you know, really clamp down on these drug dealers and let's build Homan Square in Chicago or whatever, right? And he looked at this and he says, those rats are in solitary confinement. Of course they're going to medicate themselves. In fact, there's I have a quote from him relative to that. He says, they were severely distressed animals, and severely distressed animals, like severely distressed people, will relieve their distress pharmacologically if they can. So he built a 200-square-foot housing colony, 200 times the square footage of a standard laboratory rat cage. This is from the Psychology Wiki, by the way. Psychology.wikia.com/Ricky/Rat Park Studies. Interestingly, this study has been replicated. Bothman, Murray, and Wise in 1989 published it in Pharmacology, Biochemistry, and Behavior. Although the Wikipedia page on the Rat Park says it's never been successfully replicated, and it's nonsense. It's not nonsense, and it has been replicated. And, you know, just like, don't believe everything you read on the internet, I guess. But anyhow, he built this 200-square-foot, 16 to 20 rats of both sexes in residence, an abundance of food, balls, wheels for play, private places for mating and giving birth. Rats who had been forced to consume morphine for 57 days on end. In other words, what you would think of as a seriously addicted drug, were brought to Rat Park and given a choice between plain tap water and water laced with morphine. For the most part, they chose the plain water. Nothing we tried, Alexander wrote, produced anything that looked like addiction in rats that were housed in a reasonably normal environment. So, crime in Chicago, or crime anywhere, is it a symptom of people? I mean, you know, we're mammals, rats are mammals. We have very similar nervous systems, and you know, we share a limbic brain. If people feel that the quality of their life is not that different from how the rats feel when they're in a lab cage, they're gonna act out in ways that are dysfunctional, just like the rats did. We also know from rat crowding experiments that were done back in the 60s and 70s that if you crowd rats, they'll turn on each other, they'll kill each other. So is the solution to the problem of crime in the United States, and you know, I'm using Chicago as an example just because Donald Trump keeps, and every Republican at every turn, in every opportunity, will point to it and mention it. And, you know, as I've said many times, I think, you know, part of the problem with gun violence in Chicago is the fact that Mike Pence's Indiana has super lax gun laws, and people can just, you know, drive over the border and pick up, you know, most of the guns that are found in Chicago came from Indiana. But is the solution to do what Donald Trump is suggesting, which is what President Duarte is doing in the Philippines right now, which is basically declare all-out war on people who are behaving badly? Duarte is killing them. I haven't heard Trump call for that, but it's happening anyway. Or is the solution to go in and say, okay, here's a neighborhood in distress. We're going to undistress this neighborhood. We're going to put in some really high-quality schools. We're going to bring jobs into this neighborhood. It's time for a Works Progress Administration, a WPA. The government is going to be the employer of last resort. If no company, see, this is assuming that we don't change our trade laws so that the jobs come back to America. So let's make the government the employer of last resort. There's lots of things that need to be done. There's things that could be manufactured. There's things that, yeah, I mean, there's just lots of things that could be done. We could create government jobs, government paid for jobs. As Franklin Roosevelt said, the best welfare program is a job. People, you know, gives people meaning in their lives. Go into these neighborhoods and say, okay, you know, here are the here's jobs, here's housing, here's food, here's good education. Let's standardize all this stuff. Let's improve all this stuff. Let's create a reasonable, you know, instead of we're just going to drop people in the middle of the poverty level. Let's bring people up to at least the bottom of what you would call the middle class, and then let them launch themselves from there, because they will. We've seen this over and over and over again in the history of the United States, and the best example was the WPA and the CCC. So, my will.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
I think we need to seriously change the way that we're looking at crime in this country. Hey, want to hear that clip again? Subscribe to the Thom Hartmann Program on YouTube to see all your favorite show highlights.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Folks in our chat room really pulled up a lot of these things. U.S. Attorney General vows to examine Eric Garner case. This is from Reuters. That must have been before. Sessions promises to end federal harassment of local police. That's a headline in thenewamerican.com. GQ, it used to be called Gentleman's Quarterly. Jeff Sessions doesn't give a damn about police violence is the headline. New York Times, Sessions indicates Justice Department will stop monitoring police, local police department, troubled police agencies, actually, is the whole phrase. This is, well, what can you say? This is what happens when you elect Republicans. Stephanie in Winterville, Georgia. Hey, Stephanie, thank you for calling. What's on your mind?
Hey, you're welcome. How are you?
I'm fine.
I really enjoyed the exchange earlier with, I think it's Lisa from Seattle, and then her whole response to her about International Women's Day, and I'm not sure how much I can add to that. She said that so eloquently. But just listening to you read about Ben Franklin from your ADHD book, it got me kind of thinking about how, I wonder if part of why there aren't as many women inventors or noted thinkers. I mean, I know part of it is just kind of women's history being erased under male supremacy, but when you were talking about how he needed time to follow different thoughts and jump from one thing to another and wander around different streets in town and stay up all hours of the night working on, ideas and inventions. It occurred to me that it's so much harder to do that when you're the person who's responsible for raising the kids and keeping the house clean and cooking, and also you're supposed to look good while you're doing it all. And as someone who worked in child care for 8 years, it's also not the greatest paid work either, the caregiving industry. Yep. So women, then we have less money to have free time and support our own time to have thoughts and ideas. And I actually was wondering if you knew of any work that's specifically focused on women with ADHD and how they manage that, and then with addition to having this role of taking care of kids and being a wife. And
I think what you're describing and what Ben Franklin and Thomas Edison benefited tremendously from is white male privilege, basically. Yeah. And there's no other way to call it than that. And within a system of white male dominance, of white male supremacy. And that system is still intact and very much alive and well today. And of course, it was even more vigorous, back at the founding of our republic. But with regard to women with ADHD, Sari Solden, SariSolden, has written several books about women with ADHD. She's a friend. She's a therapist in Ann Arbor. She's brilliant, and she does and she and also Ellen Littman, who's a psychologist, PhD. Psychologists have collaborated on at least one book. I collaborated on a book with the two of them, where I wrote a chapter for a book that the two of them published back, this was 15 years ago. But her stuff is just great. And she doesn't get into, the political dimensions of it or the white supremacy dimensions of it or the male supremacy dimensions of it. But she gets into the women's, the unique challenges that women have in this society that seem to be largely ignored by physicians and by society, particularly when it comes to things like ADHD. Stephanie, I've got to move along, but I hope that's helpful.
Yes, thank you.
Great. Thank you for your call and for everything you had to say. Donetta in Buckley, Washington. Am I saying your name right?
No, it's Donita, and I'm from Bremerton, Washington.
which is just an hour ferry ride across from Seattle.
Oh, great.
Seattle. Thank you very much. And I had to call because of the medical issue. I just recently had rotator cuff surgery last week. And 2 years ago, I had it done 2.5 years ago on my right shoulder, and it was about $17,000. I got a call right before the surgery that said my hospital bill alone was $50,000. And my part was $5,000. And I was in shock, so I called my doctor about it. They said that is even without the anesthesiologist and without the surgeon. Wow. And what happened is we have a conglomerate of hospitals. It's taking over. It's called CHI Franciscan, which is Catholic Health Initiative Franciscan, which I don't really think has much to do with Catholicism. But what happened is we have had an insurance company that was taken over by an HMO, Group Health, and now that Group Health is being taken over by Kaiser. And what happened when we didn't have anything to say about that, but Kaiser's the first HMO, as you probably know, and our premiums not only went up, our co-pays went up from $20 to $35 a visit, and I was just shocked to find out. But what happens here with this CHI, they are the only hospital that we have on this peninsula. So we can't get surgeries done any other place.
Right. So in other words, it's a completely non-competitive environment as a consequence of acquisitions and purchases and whatnot.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so they are making a one payer.
Yeah.
But they're making it the wrong way. And what happens is this hospital, this CHI, I know that has taken over about 6 hospitals, at least 4 in Seattle. And it's just amazing how this can happen so quickly. And we pay our insurance. We paid our taxes. And it's just horrible. I just had to call and let you know that my surgery increased over 3 times as much.
Yeah, 300%. That's incredible. Danita, thank you for sharing your story. I'm guessing that this is a common thing all across the United States. And
I mean, I didn't get good quality care, but it's like, my God.
Right. Yeah, from 17,000 to 50,000 in just a couple of years. That's amazing. Danita, thank you so much for the call. Patrice in Villa Park, Illinois. Hey, Patrice, what's on your mind?
Hi, Tom. Thanks for taking my call. I just wanted to...
Patrice, the wind is louder than you are.
It's windy here today.
Is there? Okay. Can you put your hand around the microphone or something so that we can hear you instead of the wind?
Thank you.
Okay, I hear you now.
Thank you. My husband went to a drugstore to pick up his prescription. Literally in 1 month, it changed from $7 a month to $35 a month. And he asked the pharmacist why, and the pharmacist said, because the pharmaceuticals just raised the prices. That was the only answer.
Yeah. And they raised the prices because they can, because there's been all these acquisitions and mergers in the pharma and big pharma, and it's now hyper big pharma. And because we can't import drugs into the United States from other countries where they negotiate drug prices, and the drug prices are a fraction of what they are in the United States, we are, at the mercy of these giant pharmaceutical companies. And I've seen the same thing, and it's just it's outrageous. There's the people are going to start showing up with torches and pitchforks. I mean, this is. And the Republicans just want to make, they want to make sure that we're completely at the tender mercy of all these people with no more regulations. Regulations being, of course, consumer protections. They just want to deregulate everything. It's crazy. Patrice, thanks for sharing your story with us, and thanks for listening to WCPT. Dave in Armstrong Creek, Wisconsin. Hey, Dave, what's up?
Hey, Tom. Getting away from the Trump distractions for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
Paul Ryan is going to get around to trying to privatize Medicare and turn, privatize Social Security and turn Medicare into a voucher program eventually.
Right.
And I just wanted to point out that although Medicare and Social Security it is 2/3 of our mandatory spending, it has a constant inflow of money coming in through payroll taxes to fund it.
Yep.
While defense spending, which is over half of discretionary spending, has no designated funding stream. And the point I'm trying to make is virtually all of Social Security and Medicare benefits that are paid out go back into the economy in one form or another, paying for goods and services, and it also has a multiplier effect by creating jobs.
Yep.
While defense spending does create some jobs, but the final products are either expended or go obsolete eventually, and they can only really be used in wars. So, which is, more beneficial to our people?
Right.
I guess you could.
Yeah, defense. For every dollar you spend on defense, you get far less than $1. And I've seen different numbers over the years, that range from 30, 40 cents to 80 or 90 cents. But you get less than $1 back in terms of its impact on your economy. Whereas for every dollar that you spend on infrastructure, every dollar you spend on college education, on free college education for people, every dollar you spend on health care, you get more than $1 back just in terms of tax revenues over time as a consequence of their impact, as you correctly point out, Dave, their economic impact. And it's a really important point to make. And the same is true of Social Security and Medicare. You're absolutely right. Dave, thank you for your contribution to the show. And you wanted to add something real quick?
Yeah, they make it sound like a welfare program, and it's actually a stimulus.
Exactly. And it's not a welfare program. These are programs that we pay into, which is why they're called entitlements. And they are stimulative to the economy. And but the Republicans want to do away with them anyway. Dave, thanks for the call. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Back with more of your calls right after this. Stick around. And welcome back. Robert in Greenville, North Carolina, watching us on Free Speech TV. Hey, Robert, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. I feel like we need to let the Republicans repeal and replace Obamacare. We need to repeal and replace Trump. For the welfare of our divided country, Trump needs to show his taxes on tax day next month. And if he doesn't show, he needs to go. And that's basically... That's the only way we're going to get rolling in any direction. He has to show his taxes, and this government can make him show his taxes.
Well, there's a growing legal and political consensus, Robert, that by lying to the American people repeatedly, and in particular by calling the previous president a felon, that Donald Trump has committed high crimes and misdemeanors, impeachable offenses. And should be held to account for it. Now, obviously, the Republican Party is, in all probability, not going to hold him to account for it. But let's see what happens. I mean, there's a very real possibility that the Democrats could take Congress in 2018 if enough people are fed up and enough people show up. And that's really what we need to be doing. Thanks a lot for the call, Robert. I don't disagree at all. I do agree with your sentiment. Claro in Redway, California. Hey, Claro, what's up? Thanks for watching Free Speech.
Yeah, hi, Tom. How you doing?
Good. What's on your mind?
Well, what's on my mind is all these people, or the whole discussion about insurance going up, medical insurance going up. And there is a solution. I don't think it can be political. It's proper nourishment. I'm 70 years old. I don't get sick. I've been doing this for 45 years.
Mm-hmm.
You start where you're at and start eliminating mucus foods, et cetera, blah, blah, blah. You can learn about that.
Yep.
But the point is, our taste buds are the most plastic part of our body. I love what I eat now, just like I loved what I ate when I was 20 years old.
Are you on a plant-based diet, Clara?
No, I eat primarily that, not plant-based. Mm-hmm. But I eat soft-boiled eggs every once in a while. Mm-hmm. And I eat a chicken sausage, seasoned properly every once in a while.
So you indulge yourself.
Every day.
Yeah.
I also drink a bottle of white wine every day. And I don't get sick, Tom.
Yeah.
I'm in great shape. I'm in better shape than most people 30.
Yeah.
I walk 2 miles every day.
That helps
live
a lot.
Clean life, and praise God.
Yeah, that helps a lot.
It sure does. And I know you live a shining light, and I'm so grateful to be able to listen to you I just had to share this.
Well, thank you, Clara.
Hope you have a great day.
Okay, thank you very much. It's fascinating how people are waking up to the import of diet. You know, it's like back in the 50s and 60s. Del Davis published her book, you know, How to Eat Right to Live, Eat Right to Keep Fit, I think was the title of her first book. And my mother read this and just went on this total binge because basically Adele Davis was saying, take this vitamin and this vitamin and this vitamin. And so my mom was popping all these pills. And you know, that was kind of the start of this awareness of food, at least in the United States, I think. And then we went into the whole Swanson dinners, you know, the TV dinner thing and whatnot, and through that, you know, weird stuff in the 60s and 70s and 80s, and Reagan calling ketchup a vegetable. And now it seems like people are waking up to food and as nourishment and as medicine. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. John in Middleton, Tennessee. Hey, John, what's on your mind today?
I wanted to comment on the conversation you had with a libertarian earlier.
Yeah, with Charles.
It seems to me that the ideology of the libertarians is much similar to that of capitalism. It drives all the wealth of the nation into the hands of a very select few. And it also seems to me that problem right there may be one of the biggest problems we have in the United States right now. If you've got all the wealth in the hands of a very few, that means there's a lot of people suffering.
Yeah.
You know, if those people are suffering, you're going to have higher crime, you're going to have more abortions, you're going to have more suicides, you're going to have
more drug addiction.
Illiteracy rates will go up. Even you lose your tax base, and as a consequence, your environment suffers, your infrastructure suffers. Everything goes wrong when that happens.
Yeah, I completely agree, John. And in fact, I would say that with the way that our government was put together, constitutionally by the founders, it was not capitalism as a form of governance. Capitalism was actually very, very rarely even mentioned back in the late 1700s. But it was a form of, it was an economic structure. And, our government was not based on that economic structure. I mean, you could argue it was based on slavery, but at least in the South. And the North was benefiting from slavery tremendously, too. But to the extent that we were based on anything, that was pretty much it. But nowadays, I would say that libertarianism has said that, the essential argument of libertarianism is that capitalism, in other words, rule by capital, rule by the rich, rule by the big corporations, is a more viable form of governance than rule by the people, which libertarians refer to and Ayn Rand referred to as mob rule or mobocracy. And some of them are pretty upfront about that. They'll just come right out and say, I don't believe in democracy. I believe in libertarianism, which is capitalism, and the capitalists should run everything. The objectivists, the Ayn Rand followers, are particularly clear about this, although the people from the two main Ayn Rand groups have in the last couple of years refused to come back on this program anymore, so we don't hear from them. But they are, that's very much the case. John, you nailed it. Thanks a lot for the call. Dave in Portland. Hey, Dave, what's on your mind today?
Speaking of the libertarian worldview, when you had Charles Sauer on, one of the facts that you brought up was the inadequacy of our charitable organizations to deal with the need in our country.
Yes.
And of course, his view is, well, if you tax me less, I will give more to charity, right? Well, this reminds me of a quote from Mark Twain, who said, "The man who is born stingy can be taught to give liberally with his hands, but not with his heart. The man born kind and compassionate can have that disposition crushed down out of sight by embittering experience. But if it were an organ, the post-mortem would find it in his corpse." So basically, what Twain is saying is being charitable is a natural state of, and not necessarily something that's dictated by how much money you have.
Yeah, I agree. And in fact, I would submit to you that many, certainly not all, but many of these people who are absolutely obsessed with building their wealth to the point that they become not just multimillionaires, but billionaires. And in some cases, I mean, you've got, a dozen people on Wall Street who earn over $2 billion a year right now. And they've been able to lobby to keep their tax rate below 25% because they take it all as capital gains through the carried interest loophole. That this is a form of mental illness. This is a form of obsessive compulsive disorder where the object of their obsession is money. And the compulsion is to get more and more money no matter what the cost to others. And
hoarding.
Right. And so exactly, it's hoarding syndrome. Only instead of storing newspapers and boxes and tin cans, they're storing money. And it is a clinically diagnosable and definable mental illness, and it is destroying our country. And we need to start calling it what it is. Dave, thank you for the call. Very well said. John in Mount Vernon, Washington. Hey, John, what's on your mind?
Well, thank you for taking my call. I've been trying to get an answer to this question, and it is whether the Postal Accountability and Enhancement Act that mandated the Postal Service to fund all of its retiree benefits for the next 75 years has sunset.
It did last year.
It did.
Yeah, but actually it might be October of this year because it would have sunset. It went into effect in 2006. And I believe it went into effect, the fiscal year, the government fiscal year starts on October 1st. And so I believe it went into effect October 1st, 2006, which means that it would sunset on September 30th of 2017, right? If that's a 10-year period?
Well, they passed the bill in a lame duck session of 2006.
Right.
So that would mean that it would be October.
So it might be 2007 that went into effect, so it won't sunset until the end of September of 2018. I'm not really sure, John. I'll have to look, but we've got a lot of letter carriers who are listening to the program, and a number of them call in whenever this topic comes up. Bernie was all over this. He would know right off the top of his head. I'm sorry that I don't, but I'll see what I can do in tracking it down, and I'll get back with you tomorrow. John, I want to get one more caller in here. We've got just 1 minute left in the show. Kara in Minneapolis, listening on AM 950. Kara, you've got that minute. What's up?
Hi, Tom. I just wanted to talk about Charles Sauer and how you brought up Kansas and how horribly things have gone for them by implementing the Republican, economy type way of doing things, and how here in Minnesota we have basically done the exact opposite. And we have a governor who came in and raised the minimum wage, raised taxes on the wealthy, and we now have one of the best economies in the country. Yep. We have one of the lowest unemployment rates, and how this is just...
And you have a stable school system, whereas in Wisconsin, the 1 out of 3 teachers are being rotated in or out of public schools every year.
Exactly.
It's amazing.
It works.
Yeah, it does work. You're absolutely right. And if anybody wants to see that contrast, there have been a number of articles, good articles written about this over the last few years, about the difference between Minnesota, particularly post-Tim Pawlenty, Minnesota and Wisconsin, with Scott Walker, and how Minnesota is just, outperforming, even though they're both in the upper Midwest. They both have very, very virtually identical demographics and psychographics and everything. Kara, thank you for the call. Thanks for the reminder. That was brilliant. I really appreciate it. Great way to end the show. And thanks so much for being with us today. We'll be back tomorrow. And in the meantime, don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. It requires all of us. That includes you. So get out there, get active, tag, you're it. See you tomorrow.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
The Thom Hartmann program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the organic wine company, ecowine.com.
The Thom Hartmann program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit freespeechbeats.com.